All right, how's it going, everyone? So today I have the honor of being joined by other members of the 3XL gang. Do we all wear 3XL? I have a feeling that we do, but or maybe
I'm
2X.
double XL.
Double. Okay, so we have okay. So it's just me. I'm the fat one here. Okay, I get it. I just like the extra space, quite honestly. You know, like obviously on a windy day.
Where I buy. Like Target, I'm probably triple XL. But I like true classic, so I get like double X, and it's perfect.
Perfect, yeah.
And
like also it kind of depends too, like on windy days, because obviously if it's too baggy on a windy day, like it just becomes form fitting for that muffin top, and you're just like, let me wear something that hides that a bit better. But today I'm joined by some of the most just gargantuan of humans, strong of humans, and some of the smartest ones as well. So I think we're going to have a great conversation today. We're going to be talking about the intermediate stage to that advanced stage. We're going to talk about some of the misconceptions people who are in my shoes have on the road to getting to where these men are standing right now. So my name is Karel King, stancetrain.com, and then I'm joined by Sam and Andrew Kyle Tang. Sam, would you like to add anything to introduce yourself? Yeah, the most important credential there is. Let's go, brother.
That's all I got.
Based.
That's it. All you guys are doing.
It's like, listen, or we can just put up a video of him benching, and then that's all the introduction is needed.
Should I cut an intro?
we could just send it in.
I guess anybody that doesn't know me, my name is Sam Sheether. I am an amateur strongman and a full-time strength and conditioning coach. I make YouTube videos. My channel is Sheether Training. I take my own training quite seriously, and that's led me to have a lot of speculations about best practices for getting big and strong. I've been putting out YouTube videos for 6 years of tips I think are good for getting big and strong. That's who I am.
Yeah, one thing I kind of think about when it comes to your content is nowadays it's really popular for those pickup channels are coming back, and the super how to get girl channels are coming back, but they're always ran by these single misogynistic dudes. Sam is the married guy in the conversation. He's been in a healthy relationship for 10 plus years, showed up for his woman every day, and the woman is training. This guy has not missed the training session in over 10 years. So and the results are there for that. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, for sure, dude. My name's Andrew Kyle Tang. I'm a strength coach. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram. It's at Andrew Kyle Tang on both those platforms. I just love working out. I love being jacked. I love being strong, and I like helping people along the way to get there as well.
Nice. Perfect. So today, the first thing I wanted to kind of address with both of you is what I have come to perceive, I might be wrong, I live in a bubble, to be a pretty common, roadblock, or a really common misconception in the thinking of many intermediate lifters or self-proclaimed intermediate lifters on the internet, which is that, as things get more difficult, that means I'm getting more advanced. And I think that's a misconception, because I think it actually does a disservice to people who are actually advanced. Because in my eyes, the ones who truly are the advanced lifters, it's not that things are difficult. It's just that they have spent way more time refining their process. And to say that your process is difficult is not accurate, because you guys have got rid of a lot of the complexity and a lot of the moving variables in your life to actually become where you're standing. Or maybe and because I'm only speculating because I'm not there yet, I kind of wanted to bring that up to you. Do you see that as an issue people have, when they are trying to reach that, bridge that gap between intermediate to advanced? And is that something that you feel you've done to get to where you're at right now? We can start with Sam with it first.
Okay, yeah. So I guess first would be my standard talking point of how for some reason it became the consensus definitions on the internet of beginner, intermediate, advanced is defined by rate of progression. I think that's really silly, because someone can plateau at very beginner level strength because they're not sleeping and they're not eating protein. Their rate of progression is slow. They certainly should not be considered an intermediate lifter now, right? So rate of progression can't really be our only metric for how advanced someone is. We have to take some kind of consideration into the level of process, which is kind of my whole pitch, is that our beginner, intermediate, advanced should be an assessment of how high level their process is. There's some people, maybe they're a smaller person, maybe their genetics are subpar, so they're numerically, they don't jump out at you, but their level of process is very high. And if you watch them for a couple of days, you could say, oh, wow, your tech is pretty dialed in, your program is pretty dialed in, your nutrition is pretty dialed in. You're doing this very well. I would consider that an advanced lifter. Whereas you could have someone who is quite strong and doing things very sloppily, but because they're a big guy with very good genetics, I would still consider them a beginner, even if the absolute tonnages they are moving is big. So it's kind of always been my thing is, we can't talk about beginner, intermediate, advanced, talking only rate of progression. Because like I said, there are guys who plateau at numbers and they're like, oh, I got to move to an advanced program. Or you could just start eating food. You could stop binge drinking every weekend. There's a bunch of things you could do without changing away from your beginner program to an intermediate program. So if those things would all fix it, it's not a programming issue. So I've always just liked this idea of like, I can look at somebody, regardless of how strong they are, and kind of gauge their level of process. So I guess your question is like, how much do you need to cut down on like other things in your life to make your process higher level? And to some degree, you kind of have to, I don't think it's as much as some people pitch. I think some people are like, you have to live in a box. And it's like, no, if you bring your meals with you and you go to bed on time, you can hang out with your friends. Like maybe you drink something non-alcoholic if you're in the middle of like a peaking phase or a hypertrophy. Like if you're in a contest prep, maybe you have to make some decisions there, head home early, but you also don't have to not leave your house, right? So I would say that like some people dramatically overstate it because they're using it as an excuse for like, I think a lot of people, it's just them caving to their social anxiety and living and never leaving their house. And they're like, well, I'm doing it for lifting. You don't need to do that part. You can hang out with your friends as long as you and your friends all like lifting and you guys go get a lifting friendly meal together. You're staying on plan. Nothing you're doing is deviating from your goals there if you have friends that share your goals, right? So some people, I think it's just them caving to this kind of desire they have in their head to never interact with people and then justifying it. But on the other hand, right, there are people that the way they live and what they deem being a normal person is not compatible with reaching the highest level of performance possible, right? If you say being a normal person, right, and you're like, oh, I just do normal things. Your normal things involve binge drinking every weekend, and it would be a tremendous sacrifice for you to stop doing that. Yeah, that's not compatible with being the best version of you from a strength athlete perspective possible. So yeah, there are modifications you have to make. Usually that kind of works itself out because guys kind of get that out of their system in their early 20s and they kind of get bored of it and they have to kind of settle down their lifestyle to something that happens to be more conducive to strength training anyway and start going to bed a little earlier, stop drinking so much. But there are people that like, if that's how you like living your life and you are really, really serious about your goals, you are going to have to kind of modify your commitment socially. You're going to have to. So I would say it's kind of in the middle. I think that some people overstate it, some people understate it. But the better you get, the more you do have to kind of standardize your days. And the more you can get your days looking repetitive, the more you can refine your process. Because the problem is that every day looks different. We can try to wing it and come up with our meals and wing it and come up with our plan. And we can do pretty good. If we're an advanced lifter, we have a really good understanding of what variables need to be checked. We can do a pretty good job, but it's not going to be as good as someone who has a very consistent schedule. Their job, they clock in at 9, they clock out at 5. They know exactly when their break is going to be. They bring food for that break. They can really build optimizations around that consistent schedule. And it's like things need to be consistent before we can start building in those optimizations. So at some point, you do have to kind of make your life a little bit more boring, especially if you're starting from an exciting point. My life has always been boring, so I never had to make any changes. Like I went from I ran at like 5 in the morning before high school. I would go to school, I would get off school, I would go to boxing, and then I would get out of boxing and I would go lift weights. So there wasn't anything I had to cut out, really. If anything, I had to start training a little bit less. So I can't say I've made these big sacrifices. Like, I've never drank before. I've never been to a party. None of these things were things I had to stop doing. I just never started doing them. So there's no sacrifices were made on my end.
That is the best response possible. But I do want to get like your thoughts as well, Andrew, because like you're a coach, and you coach a wide variety of different lifters, wide variety of people with different backgrounds. So I'm sure that not only from your own personal experience, but then also the experience of like your clients as well, like the insights you have from that.
Yeah, I want to bounce off of Sam real quick and say that I personally agree with pretty much everything you're saying. It's like you don't have to sacrifice everything. You can still be social. You can still just live your life. you might just have to make some slight modifications here and there. I think a great point you made is just, like you might have to bring your own meals to some places, or you might have to avoid eating certain things or drinking certain things, and that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And if your friend group's going to give you shit for that, like if anyone's going to be watching this, if somebody's going to give you shit for that and you call them a friend, you might want to check that because it's like your friend should support you in your endeavors and stuff like that. I would say I look at things similarly to Sam, where we're thinking about programming. We're thinking about and programming in the sense of like, okay, what phase of training do we need to be in right now? What areas of weakness are there that we need to be attacking? How good of a program are you running right now? Is it stale? Yada, yada, yada. Because, like somebody could just be not progressing as much, but they could just be burning the candle on both ends. Like they could just be like running a program they probably don't even need to do. It could be too specific. It could be too whatever. It's just not really the stimulus they need right then and there. And it could just be that problem. Another avenue that we can look at is, like you mentioned, nutrition. A lot of people don't eat what they should be. A lot of people undereat calories, but particularly protein, like really freaking bad. I worked as a personal trainer. Half of my clients didn't even know what the fuck. Exactly. Half of my clients didn't even know what the fuck protein was. So it's like, oh God, like what they thought was a protein source is like, it's not a protein source, man. Like,
I was just talking shit with my girlfriend about this. When people cite peanut butter as a protein source, I always cool.
I have a peanut butter jelly sandwich every day.
Yeah, right. It's like, here's a very cool rule of thumb for everybody out there. If it's got more fat than it's got protein, that is a fat source.
Absolutely.
Not a protein source.
Yeah, like bare minimum, I would say like 1 to 2 ratio of like fat to protein. Like bare minimum. At least personally, that's what I reached for. So that's another like thing we can look at too. I also look at like coordination as well, because Sam, to your point, you could just be a naturally strong fucker and down a lot of freaking weight, but your movement could be the sloppiest thing in existence. And sure, like you do that and you can get away with it, but imagine what would happen if you would find that. And all those things kind of sleep, of course, too, recovery, kind of into nutrition a bit as well, but all those things can get in tandem. I think that forms the athlete. As far as like my personal experience, I've gone to some parties. I'm certainly not a party animal. I've had a few drinks, but like it's not really something I care to do. Like I've done it just because like maybe friends have wanted to go. I want to hang out with friends. I'm a pretty social guy, or I like to be social when I can. But same thing. It's like just because people are drinking doesn't mean you have to. Even if you have just one, it's not really the end of the world either. It's just like accept it for what it is. You might have that 1 or 2 drinks, and sure, you might not even feel that wasted. But if you're training the next day, okay, well, accept that responsibility. Like or accept the consequences of it. You're probably going to feel a little bit like shit. It is what it is. For me personally, though, I just don't really care to do those things. I prefer just kind of meeting people and stuff. So I kind of avoid the drinking outright. Like I had a beer for my birthday the other day and it like took the wind out of me. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm at that age now where I just should not be drinking anyways. But I think a lot of people overemphasize. I think this is a tricky question to answer, because on one hand, I want to say that people overemphasize effort in the gym, but that's not really true. I think you should put a lot of effort into the gym, but at the same time, they don't take. It's what I mean to say is the effort that people put into the gym, they should take that and they should drive it into their sleep, nutrition, recovery, stress management, things like that, because that's the shit that's not really talked about a whole lot. I mean, it kind of is in the Gen Pop scene. Like I follow a couple like general population, like fitness Instagram pages just because, I don't know, I like their content. But they kind of talk about that a little bit more. But I feel like for powerlifting, it's not really talked about as much. That's just my own subjective view. Like my feed is literally curated to like my own liking. So there's that too. But Sam?
That ties into something I think that like it could be. I don't know if I would call it part of being advanced, but it's a big predictor of the athletes I see succeed versus not succeed, right?
Yeah.
Because if you take, you get some 10 guys, they're getting in the gym for like high school weight room or high school football. The ones that initially excel, like kind of right out of the starting gate, are the ones that just immediately train hard. Like whether they're an angsty dude, whether it's because of their sporting background, whether that's just they're just a hardworking person by nature, it's how they were raised. There's a bunch of different reasons why someone might kind of get how to push themselves right out of the starting gate. And those guys, let's say there's 3 of them, those 3 guys will see drastically different looking results than the other 7 that don't know how to engage intensity in their training. So it's like, okay, at the very first step into the gym, man, you can't overstate how important training intensity is, right?
Yeah.
But then you take those 3 guys, and the one that's going to pull ahead of the other 2 is, like you said, that's the guy that then understands, oh, this is kind of a 24/7 thing. It's not just about pushing myself to the limits. And it's not just about having good form for the 2 hours I'm in the gym. It's also what do I do before and after that's going to set me up. And that's kind of where you'll see this stratification of like, you're going to see a bunch of guys go forward because they got good genetics and they work hard. But then of the guys who got pretty darn good, the guys who get really good are the guys that the second they finish the training session, they get like something just ticks in their head. It's not something, most of them didn't learn it. Most of the good athletes that I've worked with, because I'm very lucky to have worked with a lot of really, really strong guys. And at the point now that I don't work with many beginners, so I'm a little bit out of touch with this. But a lot of the guys that I see continue to make progress and continue to make progress. There's just something in their head. The second they walk out of the gym, they're then thinking about how to prepare for the next training session. Oh, I got to get my meals. I'm a little short on water today. I got to go to bed early. Like, they still enjoy their life, but there's this little, it ticks over to the next session. It's prepping. And then if you prepare for every session, the difference in performance will compound and snowball into people thinking you have way better genetics when you were just the guy that were preparing really diligently for each individual one. And that's almost just like a trait. I'm sure it can be learned. Any trait can be learned. Any trait can be trained. But that's something I noticed is kind of innately there on the guys that are just like, they're winners. They're going to get stronger. They're someone who is going to succeed at whatever they were doing, and they picked weight training. The guys that I noticed, they have that even when they're a beginner. And their ideas for how to prepare are very rudimentary and they're trash. They're like, I just guzzled a bunch of mass gainer and got diabetic. And that was their idea, because they're like, I don't have that much knowledge, but I know I need to be preparing for my next session. I'm thinking about it all day. Most of the good athletes I know are thinking about it a lot of the day. And maybe they don't have the greatest information to work with. And that's part of becoming advanced is, okay, well, I know I need to prepare for tomorrow. An advanced athlete is probably going to have a better list of what actually needs to get done. They know they probably don't need to go grab their massage gun. They probably need to go grab their meals and go to bed on time, right? So it's like where we're directing that energy of, man, I'm fired up. I'm going to do everything I can to be ready for that bench set tomorrow. Where we direct that is kind of shows a lot about how advanced someone is. But that energy to want to do it is just almost this requisite quality that just the good athletes have. And maybe the ones who aren't really passionate about it never seem to show in the first place.
Yeah, I definitely I agree with that wholeheartedly, because something that I've heard this talking point quite often, but for whatever reason, it tends to be more discussed among like hypertrophy enthusiasts and bodybuilders, where they say like bodybuilding is a 24/7 sport. And I'm just like, well, here's the thing. If you're going to be great in anything, any great athlete of any sport, it is a 24/7 endeavor. They're always going to be focused on, like you mentioned, the next session, the next fight, the next like PR, everything, the next meal, even like once the clock hits a certain time, it's like, all right, cool, I got to start getting ready for bed. Like, there's no one who takes whatever it is that they're doing seriously that doesn't turn that thing into an all-day thing. Now, that being said, as we mentioned earlier, you don't need to be that guy in the Smith machine in a hoodie, like mean mugging everyone because they don't work as hard as you, and you don't like, go out to party because you're scared to talk to people. Like, you don't have to be that guy. But at the same time, the more you want out of your passion, the more you want out of the things you're choosing to pursue, the more you actually have to give to it. And the thing that we can give, and like, that we pay all the time, is our like most fundamental non-renewable resource, which is our time. And to be great is to use that time better than other people. And we can, like, as we meant, like, as you guys have touched upon, like all those things of what makes those things better. But I think it's incredibly understated about how much people have these goals, but they don't exactly know how much they have to give for those goals.
Yeah, I think it, like, when it comes to nutrition and stuff, it's like you might have to bite that bullet and meal prep, and that's fine. Like, refine it for it does take time. It is fucking annoying. I like cooking because, like, I grew up around that when I was a kid, but like when I'm meal prepping, bro, it's the boringest shit ever. I try to make it fun, but it's like it's just it has to have enough calories for me. It has to have enough protein for me. Like, just make it work. And who cares if it's the same meal every day? Like, that's fine. You can still even have wiggle room there, but I think I kind of lean towards, and maybe this is a little cliche, but I even kind of lean towards that like 80-20 rule for some of my guys, where it's like if 80% of the time you're on top of shit, like, you should still be seeing pretty good progress. Granted, we're not trying to go below that 80. That's like bare fucking minimum. Like, that's all the wiggle room you can fucking have. And if you can narrow that, like, that room where you can fuck up, cool, even better. And even then, it's not to shame anyone, to say like, oh, like you missed one meal, like you're a fucking loser, like you're not gonna make gains. It's like, no, like everything works in tandem. Some days are better than others. Just take what's there, roll with it, roll with the punches, if you will. What's up, man?
Well, to tie into that, right? Like, you don't need to be perfect to get better, right? And really what we care about is getting better. It's not flexing or adherence, right? So it's like, as you get more advanced as an athlete, you being the person listening, or either of you or me, right? As we get more advanced, the level of our process needs to get higher and higher and higher to keep getting better. It's really hard, unfortunately, and it gets progressively harder. So it's like, when you're first starting out, you might even be able to go like, when you're really new, if you eat one meal a day that is actually what you should be eating, and that's an upgrade from 0, you're going to see some sick progress from that, right? And then, okay, shit, I'm starting to slow down in my progress a little bit. Maybe I need to actually, 2 of my 3 meals need to actually look like I'm an athlete, right? And so it's like, you don't need to beat yourself up if your process doesn't look like that of me or Andrew, because it's like, you don't need to yet. You just need to be realistic with yourself when you start to slow down, and it's like, okay, it's time to take my process to the next level, right? You don't need to look at advanced athletes and be, woe is me, I'm not at that level of process, and I can't even imagine getting there. Well, just like you, that athlete got there stepwise. Brian Shaw didn't just jump into eating 10,000 clean calories somehow. It was a very, very deliberate, slow progression over time. And so it's like, yeah, as you become more intermediate, I'm going to tell you, hey, you might want to move to like 4 feeding windows. Just practically, most guys are going to need an amount of protein. It's kind of a pain to eat it in 3. Let's just move to 4. Like, you're trying to be normal sedentary people eat 3. You're trying to be a big, strong guy. It might stand to reason that most of us would benefit from eating 4, right? Because 3 is a prescription for people that aren't our demographic. Okay, that's the next one. Okay, hey, maybe you would like, now we slow down again. Maybe we need to cut back the drinking. It's a progression, right? Just like you said, like, you don't need to beat yourself up for missing a meal. You're nowhere near the point where missing a single meal is going to have any measurable impact on your progression. If I was one of the guys prepping for like the 505 kg deadlift, yeah, I'm going to beat myself up if I miss a meal, because that's a level of human performance that like single missed meals can start to actually impact things. But none of us are there. Not even close, right? So it's like, yeah, don't beat yourself up. Just, you didn't like the feeling of missing it? Well, good. Make sure you don't miss the next one. That's fine. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just put that to use to avoid it in the future, right? So it's like, but yeah, the higher level of performance we're chasing, and the further we are away from homeostasis, the more really kind of artificial our environment needs to be to keep driving ourselves in this direction our body doesn't necessarily naturally want to go. But like, none of us are at that point of like single meal precision. Just because you got a burger with your friends and your meal called for like chicken and rice, you're fine. It had protein. Like, holy shit, that like guys will text me guilty that they ate a burger instead of their chicken and rice. And I'm like, holy shit, I do not care. Like, yeah, don't do that every day, please. Or that would just be a different diet. But I like, you hit your protein target. I could not express into words how little I care that you ate a burger.
Yeah, I think there's direction. To piggyback off of what you were talking about, Sam, You were mentioning things about like intensity and also like direction with that intensity. I think there's direction and intensity within like the gym and then outside the gym. Speaking like inside the gym, I think this is where we can talk more about maybe like programming or like quality of performance. And I think this is where a lot of people kind of shoot themselves in the foot. And that is with poor quality of training. And by that, I just mean like in layman terms, just, you know, shit form. A lot of people just have shit fucking form. And on top of that, it's just, it could just be shit form through like, because they just don't know how to move. But I think it's also not knowing how to gauge themselves, not knowing how to hold themselves back, or also not knowing how to push themselves. So I think there's kind of a pendulum swing with that. And I can say that because I used to be the type of person that didn't know how to push myself when I was first kind of getting started in the gym. And whenever I'd kind of tell myself, okay, like I'm not going to undershoot all like my top sets or whatever this time around, it would just turn to like blatant overshooting. So it's like, okay, I'm at two extremes. How do I find myself like somewhere in the middle? And I think a lot of it can boil down to how your program is written and how you execute your program in the sense of like, you know, generating like a game plan and stuff like that. But I think a lot of people as well just don't take, they might have a lot of effort to run the program, but they don't know how to be precise about it. And I think this is where being very intentional about what you're doing when you're in the gym becomes really important, especially as you get more and more advanced, because, you know, one small hiccup can mean a lot when it comes to having to recover from it. And I think that's something that, I think that's what keeps people as like lifetime intermediates, where like they don't even realize it, but it's not because, you know, they might be in a plateau, and it's not because they can't make any more progress. It's just because the prescription of intensity or volume or movement is just either too much or too little. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think also it's like that kind of can tie into the exact same program could be executed better and worse by the athlete, right? They could be prescribed correct things, but let's say they've got that little thing in their head that they're prepping for their sessions. They can't stop thinking about the gym. They've got the iron bug, and if a guy is newer to the gym, he might be thinking the only thing in his head is like, man, I'm looking forward to that session. I'm going to work so hard. I'm going to work so hard. I'm going to push myself so hard. Like that's how I was. And it wasn't until I got a little bit more advanced that part of me obsessing about my preparation was thinking about, okay, I've got this session. How can I do it really well? I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to do that session really well, right? Because a good athlete will be thinking like when you're coming into a squat session, I'm sure if you have like a technical fault you made the prior session, that's what you're thinking about, like on your drive to the gym. You're like, I'm going to fix that technical fault. You're thinking what it's going to feel like, right? So it's like, again, it's the guys that have that drive, they then need the information, right? And that's why like Brian Alsruh always used to say like, information is a privilege. You should do stuff wrong for a year of working really hard to earn the right to worry about this minutia, because the minutia will often lead people away from ever even starting working hard. That's why you have guys in the gym who can recite to me a ton of phenomenal talking points on programming, but if you watch them train, they have no idea what they're doing, and there's this big disconnect because they didn't kind of put in the effort and then follow that with the knowledge, as most successful athletes tend to do. And so I think that like that's something that's big is, okay, well, once you have this athlete that's very motivated and they're working hard, you need to teach them that part of getting better isn't just working harder and pushing yourself to the limit on every exercise. It's doing things better. And that should be part of your obsession, is not just taking pride in, oh, I work hard. You need to take pride in, oh, I do things with precision. I have great tech. If you can't take any pride in your technique, you've got something to work on. Not in a rude way, in a good way. You have a very easy way to get better. If you're someone who takes no pride at all in your technique, you have an open window to crush your PR. If you work hard enough that you start to take pride in your technique, that's a guaranteed sign, because everybody who has a little bit of pride in their technique because they know they've put a bunch of thought and effort into making it what it is. And I think the other thing is people often will Here people say, oh, well, there's no such thing as good technique because everybody lifts different. That is true on some level, absolutely, right? What good technique is for me looks a little bit different than another, but there's general criteria that we try to adhere to, right? So it's like, just because my form and your form looks different doesn't mean the same thing as all forms are exactly the same, right? Because mechanical efficiency exists. And then there's also the talking point that I've always thought is really funny, is people go, oh, bad technique has nothing to do with injury. The only thing that has to do with injury is load management. As long as we are progressing things over time, and we're not exceeding position-specific tissue tolerance, we won't get injured. It's a pure load management thing, never a technique thing, which is a really asinine point because technique is part of load management. One technique might shift a tremendous amount of load towards a specific joint or a specific musculature, and a different technique might distribute that same amount of load across a greater. It's how our fatigue is distributed, how our load is distributed. Technique is a major informant of where that stress is being placed. So it's like, it's not crazy to say, hey, guy who's got a history of knee issues, maybe if you have slightly less forward knee travel and you do more of like an old school hips back squat, and we place a little bit more of that demand towards the posterior and split those demands from the knee extensors and the hip extensors, maybe that's what's going to lead you to stop chronically tweaking your knee, right? So it's like, I don't know. That's something that I've always thought is funny because it's like, I don't understand how you could argue that technique isn't part of load management because technique informs what tissues are being loaded. And so it's like, yeah, if someone's overstressing a certain tissue, it's a totally valid intervention to say, use a technique that distributes that loading differently. And mechanical efficiency is a thing, whether we want to believe it is or not. So there has to be at least some kind of better and worse. That being said, like, yeah, some people will try to universally cue. And if you don't squat exactly like Lu Xiaojun, you're an idiot. Yeah, okay, cool. I have like white people femur lengths. Good luck, right? It's like, that's not going to happen. So it's like, you can take it too far and go towards the argument of universal cueing. But, you know, like you said, most good coaches, like maybe they butter it up because they like to be more in line with the language we like to use. If you're like really academically savvy in like the PT world and you're big on this whole, there is no bad form, there's just bad load management. Maybe you use this really like smooth language to change what you're saying, but you're saying good form. Your form needs to get better. You're telling your athlete that there are technical adjustments we need to make. That would imply you think you're doing something good. That would imply it's good form for that athlete, right? So while there isn't a universal good form, there's probably better and worse for an athlete. Like whether we want to use language to kind of dodge around that point, or if you could just kind of extend someone the olive branch and know that they're not just a total brainlet and say, okay, well, I know what you mean when you're saying bad form, right? I'm not saying you're going to be some super dogmatic weirdo who's going to tell me my knee's going to implode if I have any inward knee shift. I know you're not that guy, but you're a coach with practical form guidelines that he likes to have his athletes follow. I know you mean something reasonable when you say good form, right? But I totally get just dodging the question by using like waxy language too, because I'm very guilty of that. I just don't want to engage in that argument, right? Because I just think it's stupid. So you can kind of just avoid it entirely by just changing the word good form to like technical adjustments and like just it's dumb. It's really just an exercise in like you're putting your brain to use for the wrong thing, which is just trying to please everybody.
Yeah, I don't know where that culture of like thought really started, but
the barbell medicine guys are a big
okay. Thanks, man.
He just pulled out the
saying that
like,
my ass, by the way. I legitimately did
indiscriminately.
That is good to know. Because I agree with you. I
think the barbell medicine guys have done a lot more good than harm. I really like them.
Yeah.
I just got into like an argument in their comment section one side where I just thought they were trying to be a little bit sensationalist with the title and say there's no good form or there's no such thing as a injury risk reduction exercise. And I was like, any exercise is an injury risk reduction exercise following your guys' model of like tissue tolerance.
Yeah.
Resistance exercise improves tissue tolerance. Just strengthening relevant muscles does reduce your risk of injury. There's no such thing as injury prevention. But again, you're just kind of being a douche and assuming they mean something really literal when they're using a blanket term. Most people that say injury prevention know you're not immune to injury if you do this exercise. It just reduces your chances. They know that. But no, I think they're great. I really think they do way more good. I just get hung up on semantics. Like I was just telling Kirsten, like I feel like Squat U, I think, might be a net negative. I think the amount of positive influence on lifters might be completely offset by making people extremely neurotic about chasing perfect form with absolutely no overload. When a lot of the health benefits of lifting are derived from the overload component, right? So it's like I could take squat U and I could say there's some good here, there's some bad here. My personal suspicion is that the bad might actually outweigh the good. But on the other hand, there's no debate. The barbell medicine guys have done way more good for spreading understanding of like pain science and saying it's extremely multifactorial. Just because you're in pain doesn't mean there's actually physiologically an injury there. It's an amalgam of external stressors, and managing our stressors is a great way to manage pain. They're single-handedly very responsible for propagating that pain science information out into the lifting world. But I get hung up on the semantics of they're like, I know they're just doing it because it drives engagement. If you just say there's no such thing as bad form, it's like, okay, that conversation could be a little bit more nuanced. And so I'm going to be annoyed, but you're doing way more good than harm.
Yeah, absolutely. But to your point, I do agree with you. I think there are, like, if we take a squat, for example, like if I have a client that's squatting, whether they're very built to squat or not, I'm going to look for rigidity in their spine. I'm going to look to make sure that their hips are, at least relatively speaking, pretty stacked underneath the rib cage, just general things like this. It's like, on one hand, I get what people mean when they say there's no like good technique, bad technique, whatever. But yeah, there are techniques that either load different tissues in different ways or emphasize different tissues in other ways. And it's like, if I have someone that's deadlifting and if their back is just rounded to like the absolute brink of snapping, it's like, okay, yeah, like that's bad fucking technique. Sorry. But like that is like, I'm gonna fix that. And I think this is where I get really hung up with like the semantics and stuff. Cause I see a lot of powerlifters, whether they're just kind of up and coming or really strong already, like they're elite. And I like look at their deadlift. I'm just like, really? Like, ew. Cause like I'll see those like very fundamental pieces like missing.
At me.
I pull sumo, and one of the things that really propelled my sumo deadlift strength was training my posterior chain. And that's because not that I would squat my deadlift, but having that base of strength just helped me in so many ways when it came to, the load increasing. Like my quads can output way more than my posterior chain can. So if I can get my posterior chain stronger, cool. Like I'm going to get a lot stronger in my deadlift. And I think a big issue I see with a lot of powerlifting specific programming, coaching, training, whatever, I think there's so much emphasis on that specificity that I think people get held back because now their movement just degrades over time. And it's like that technique becomes default, not because they're intentionally trying to move in a certain way, but because that stimulus is so over fucking abused. Like their progression hits a wall. So of course they're going to have to move they're going to start moving in different ways. Little things are going to start adding up. You start compounding basically like shitty movement on top of shitty movements, over the course of a training cycle. And it's just like, yeah, no wonder why you're in fucking pain and you may have squeezed out a 5 kilo PR, but like, was it really worth it? I don't know. I kind of went on a tangent with that. Let me know if that resonates with y'all.
No, I think no, I totally get what you're saying, right? It's like high level athletes. I say it on my channel all the time, right? Like the more advanced you get, the specificity in your training needs to come up, right?
Yes.
And that's something that like Eastern European systems will deliberately take advantage of. If you throw your kid into like a development system in like, let's just say Soviet Russia, we go back a couple of years, right? They're going to be playing like 3 sports when they're up to like the age of 10, and then they drop back to 2, and then it's 1 sport, and they're training for that 1 sport that they're now specialized in. Their training gets more and more and more specific across their training career. So they're not just throwing them into the deep end of specificity when they're a beginner. When they could get better with less specificity, they're taking advantage of that to build more general physical qualities, build the ability to do a wide range of movement patterns, develop a whole lot of different musculature. right? While we can get away with that, we better be doing it. And I think that's where the big disconnect happens is we all follow the guys who are the absolute best. The guys who are the absolute best are having to train very specific by that point in their career, but that's not what they did earlier in their career. And the vast majority of people that follow these people, if they've got 100,000 Instagram followers, 99,000 of them are beginner to intermediates, right? Who are going to be then misapplying it if they then copy their training directly. So just because we see Jamal Browner doing pulls from the floor verbatim like 3 times a week doesn't mean you should be, right? We should be building a wider base with a little bit more variety and then introducing those incremental increases of specificity when they become necessary, right? Like nowadays, I've had to up my specificity more than I like, and it really annoys me. I really miss when I could train for much more general strength and see it carry over, right? Like my bench press is my best lift. I used to be able to get away with doing 1 day of bench press, 1 day of Larson press, and 1 day of overhead press. I pressed 3 days a week, and that led me just chipping away for a very long time, right? And it's like now I've gotten to the point where I've done a 375 overhead press. That's not carrying over anymore. I'm an advanced bench presser. I need to do something else. I need to bench press. My training needs to be less just building muscle, and it needs to be bench press practice, right? Just like it's a sport at that point. I need to start upping my specificity. And like John Hack benches with some small variation, but he benches like regular bench 3 days a week. Maybe he introduces a light band, which is like, that's very specific still. A light band, you're still applying all the exact same cues. Your leg drives the same. Nothing is fundamentally changing there because he needs to practice his sport 3 times a week because he's already built most of those base physical qualities. And I've had to do that. And it's lame. I like when I could train incline all the time, overhead. I like when my deadlift, I could just do a bunch of rowing and expect my deadlift to get stronger. But it's like, damn, I finally, like 10 years in, I'm at the point where to get better at deadlifting, really, I have to just deadlift more, which is less fun. But earlier in my training career, like abusing the hell out of like RDLs was, I mean, I still benefit from RDLs, but I think that's something that people really misapply. And also to kind of touch on what you were saying, Andrew, what you were saying is very reflected in the Chinese weightlifting system, because the majority of the weightlifters in China they've got this. Well, they got the same build as you, right? Which is short femurs, long torso, right? Where it's like when you have majority of your athletes all have the same build, you're going to see most of them have the same weaknesses and strength emerge naturally. The exact same thing you said. Getting your squat up isn't the hardest thing in the world. Your quads are going to be strong just by the nature of how you're built. Your squat is always going to use the hell out of them. And so if you look at like the Chinese weightlifting system, and the same natural weakness emerges. I also have short femurs and a long torso, and it's also been the story of my career. The quads were very easy to keep strong, and the same weakness naturally emerges. Part of it's because it's a longer lever in a longer torso, and part of it is because you're going to try to do everything with your legs. So it's like if you look at their system, they're constantly doing back extensions and heavy pulls from the floor after their very limited squat volume. The Chinese team only squats twice a week, is what I hear. Whereas like many other systems, you're looking at 3, 4, 5 sessions per week to try to keep the quads strong. But they're like, okay, we're going to do the bare minimum squatting because we're all good at it by default. And then we're not going to allow our athletes to have that. Like you're not allowed to have a weak back. That's the predisposition that all of the athletes have. And we're going to build a system that just does not allow for a weak back. And it's this constant repetition of hip extension. What? Oh, your low back is a little tired. Too bad. Do more back extensions. Right. It's like like it's tired because it's weak. You need to try to acclimate it to greater workloads. If you try to baby lower back because it gets sore really easy, well, it's always going to get sore really easy. You do have to kind of aggressively load into this weakness in a safe way to try to develop enough work capacity to overcome how you're built and make it so that's not inevitably your weakness. Right? Like you have a gnarly, strong, stiff leg deadlift, and it's like that is a variation that's directly challenging what is going to be naturally your weakness for most of your career, right? Because it's just like go back to specific training, the quads are just going to magically keep getting ahead. Like it's never you're never going to be a weak quad lifter. And much the same, the exact opposite side of the coin. His whole career, Ed Cohn, for the whole off season would always do close stance high bar squats, and you're like, man, you're spending more of the year doing close stance high bars than your actual comp squat. don't you think maybe eventually your quads would get so strong your back is the weakness? Hell no. If you're built like Ed Cohn is, your back is never going to be a weakness. It never switched on him, right? So it's like when you have a little bit more of the extreme end of the build, you can kind of predict which one your body is going to naturally bias towards. And then you can identify a variation that you're going to be able to keep in there for the rest of your life because it's directly addressing with the kind of the way your body's trying to go. You're trying to stop it. You're trying to stay well-rounded.
I think
same thing for me.
Yeah, I think so. You said a couple points. Actually, you've said a couple points in the duration of this video that I've brain farted on, and the train's already left. But before I forget, I want to say that, and this kind of alludes to what you were saying about basically how there are levels to this. And I recently went on like a bit of a tangent on my Instagram story, kind of talking about this too. But yeah, like there are levels to training. And in the beginning, you're probably going to be spending more time doing some more general shit. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think you should be developing a pretty robust sense of just general strength and being able to apply it across the board. And I think that's important for a couple of reasons, just in the sense of not over abusing movement patterns, just keeping things fresh, building a wide base of not only muscle, but just general like coordination as well, which I think is something that is not talked about enough when it comes to powerlifting. I think coordination is probably, maybe it's not the most important, but I would say it's the most underrated aspect of a lifter's skill that they may or may not have. Whenever I onboard clients, whenever I work with clients, my biggest thing is always making sure they know how to move correctly. And this kind of goes back to the whole idea of like having intention in your training. How are you doing your RDLs? How are you doing your squats? How are you doing your good mornings, benching, yada, yada, yada. Just how are you doing it? Because if you're doing it wrong, like if you're only going to get quality results if you put in quality work at the end of the day, especially as you get more and more advanced in your training as well. The other thing I was going to mention is, yeah, like I have quad drive for fucking days. It's like halfway or like a third up out of the hole of the squat, my back will start to like, it'll want to pitch. And yeah, it's weird. The one thing that's helped me overcome that, oddly enough, was running Bulgarian on my squat. I think just having to grind all the time just taught me how to like develop that like robust sort of posture. Nowadays, I think a lot of it just has to do with my like posterior chain training and just kind of knowing the feeling of how to do it. But I think that kind of goes into my point about coordination as well. It's like, I know that sensation. I know that feeling. I know how to engage it. And so it's like, if you're going to do something to a standard, like in a powerlifting meet, whether it's squatting to depth, benching with a long enough pause, deadlifting, and make sure you actually stand upright, I think you need to create a technique that is trainable in the sense of you can do it over a long period of time without hurting yourself, without inducing so much fatigue, such that you can barely recover until like 2 weeks fucking later. And on the other, and another point to that too, allowing that to lead you towards a technique, a movement that is also consistent, which I think kind of plays into the whole like, which plays into not having it be something that just is kind of wildly fatiguing at random points in your training. What's up, bro?
I think that's a really, really good point that also actually ties into what you initially led off this statement with, a lot more than people think, right? People say, okay, well, early in the training career, our training is more varied. Well, part of the reason our training is more varied early in our training career is because we aren't good at the lifts, right? Yeah. If you take somebody who has like a bench press where their elbows are wobbling all over, they have no idea how to stabilize their scaps, they don't know how to turn the press into a bit of a decline, and you say, hey, bro, bench press 3 days a week, relatively hard. They're going to come to you in 1 week and tell you, hey, my shoulders are killing me, right? Even though the weight on the bar isn't that much. It's the getting really mechanically efficient technique that lets you down the line get more specific with your training, right?
Yes.
Because it's like, if I remember, I tried to bench press heavy 3 days a week when I was relatively new to the gym, and I was very inefficient at my bench press and my shoulder fell apart. I can now bench press over 500 pounds 3 days a week. I could probably do that 5-6 weeks in a row because the movement is very efficient. So it's like, when we're in that early phase of training, yeah, we're really trying to hone in our technique to get to the point that it's so much less taxing on our body that we can then start to do it more often. But we need to get to the point. And there's kind of a chicken or the egg thing there, just like you said with the Bulgarian, where it's like, you can also kind of throw yourself into a little bit of an adapt or die situation.
Yes.
Say, hey, we're going to do this often regardless. Body, you better get efficient at this shit or we're going to get hurt. Right. And it's like, you can kind of you could toe that line by trying to drive forward.
I think that was extremely dumb luck, though. My squat was in the fucking gutter when I ran that program. And usually whenever my squat progress is like, something's wrong here. That's when I'm like, fuck it, let's try Bulgarian. Let's give it a shot.
I mean, there's something to be said for that. I'm bad at it. I'm just going to do it all the time. I mean, if you make it through in one piece, just doing something often does have a profound effect. It's like, you don't have to go full Bulgarian, but you can toe that line of high frequency to drive forward. If you're someone who's like strong as shit and you're like, man, I can only bench press every other week. I'm like, dude, you're strong and you're bad at bench pressing. We need to do some light bench press sessions and start getting you more efficient to be able to handle a little bit more work if we want to continue getting better here. And it also, like you said, you kind of mentioned how like you felt movement quality and coordination was extremely underrated. And that's kind of one of like the analysis I always try to have people do on themselves or for my athletes is like, hey, I kind of just have two qualities that I look for during a set. And I vaguely, I just call them intensity and discipline, right? Mm-hmm. Intensity is the ability to push yourself really far into something that's really uncomfortable. And discipline is the ability to maintain your form and keep your composure with your cueing and fight that breakdown to the very end and not just embrace, oh, I'm just going crazy and I'm slinging the weight. Okay, cool. You do have great intensity, but you lack discipline. So it's like you can look at an athlete on the first time training with them and really easily nail, okay, your discipline's actually pretty good. You're very conscious of your body during the set the whole time. You're just not training hard. You need to engage the intensity. Like usually people who aren't making great progress will fall to one side or the other of that dysfunction. And it's like, like you said, you started out maybe on the little bit more, like I was aware of how I was moving and I was aware of technique and I had to learn how to push into intensity, right? And I started on the way other side where coming from boxing, I thought just working hard was everything because that's what my coaches grounded in my head. It's like the more uncomfortable something is, the better it is. It makes you tougher. Yeah. And toughness is clearly the basis of all athletic performance, or at least that's what I thought back then. So I was like, yeah, who cares if my back hurts in the middle of this row that I'm heaving all over the place? It's uncomfortable. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. So my intensity was great. And I needed to start to engage with the ability to like, well, I can be hyped up all I want as long as the discipline is there in equal quantity. And that is truly quality lifting because I will not say who it is, but there was someone that I used to know who was a pretty good untested lifter, not great by any means. And he was chronically on the other side of that. He would always have this huge ego about how perfect his technique was and how his technique was so much better than everybody else. And he would talk to me and he would tell me how much better his technique was than mine. And I was like, it is, you're not wrong. Why are you so much worse? And it's because every single one of his sets, he would say he was a hyper responder to sub-max training. You're not hyper responding if you're not getting stronger, brother. You need your RPE 6 sets. Your technique is phenomenal. Just tack on some extra RPEs there. And I promise you're going to see phenomenal progression. Just instead of taking everything at 6 and whacking yourself off about how phenomenal your form is, let's take an 8. Maybe there's going to be the tiniest bit of breakdown. You're a technician already. Just like if a guy's a technician, all he needs to do is put his foot on the gas and the intensity a little bit. And it's like, it gets stronger every time. Every time I know someone who's got pristine technique and I get them to put their foot on the gas just a little bit, it's the exact reverse as well for people like me and a couple of my athletes, where it's like, if you're an intensity nut, it's like, just get your technique better. I promise you'll instantly lift more weight. It's like, we should be looking at these things not as if we're embarrassed that we don't engage with one side of the spectrum well. We should be looking at that excited that, oh shit, I've got an easy way to get better here. I'm being honest with myself. I fall not in that good middle point. I fall a little bit away from it. And that's an easy thing I can exploit to drive myself forward at this point in my career where it's damn difficult to drive myself forward. I still am not much of a technician because of how boxing ruined my brain. It wasn't even the concussions. It was just the whole hard work and toughness is everything mentality.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat with you, but inversely. Like, so Paris is a maniacal asshole, and dude, like what he has me doing for my straight leg deads right now, it's wild. I love it though. It scares the shit out of me, almost literally. But for me, I know I'm a proficient deadlifter. I know I've certainly improved on my ability to hip hinge. And I know it's just a matter of like, okay, like just fucking push yourself. Like rev up your intensity. I kind of look at things from, so you look at things from a perspective of intensity and discipline. I do something similar, but I call it different things. So whenever I'm explaining to my athletes, like, hey, like, here's how you should be warming up. Here's the thought that you should be having if you're, maybe building up to like a pretty intense top set. It could even be a PR top set, but I like to think of things from like we're thinking about hype. So in this context, I'd be similar to intensity, and I'm also thinking about like technicality and technique. So in what you were saying about discipline, as I'm building up towards my like heavier sets, so I'll gauge like, okay, how technical am I being, and how hyped am I being, like how intense am I being. As I'm within the 0 to 60, 70% range of like intensity of like numbers wise, like how heavy, I'm more leaning towards that technical aspect, just making sure I refine the movement, making sure that it feels really good, making sure that I just feel confident and like my technique's on fucking par today, let's fucking go. And then as I'm getting to those heavier or more intense percentages, that's where I'm like, okay, like you've shown to yourself that this shit feels good, your technique is good, we can let go of that a little bit and we can start to drive that intensity. I think that works for me really well because I come from that background of like, okay, like let's be a little bit cautious, let's take into account technique and stuff like that. But that's held me back for a very long time, and that's going to hold a lot of other people back too. And I think on one end there's like, yeah, sure, you're a technician and you keep all your shit like sub RP7. But what if you can do that at those higher RPEs? Like that's more impressive to me than just kind of being like, oh yeah, I pulled this ability PR. And it's like, that's your 5th ability PR in like a week. Like no one cares at this point. So I think for anyone who does find themselves being a little bit more technical, like don't be afraid to push yourself, because I think sometimes you have to will that into like your training, like with what Paris has me running. Like I think it was 4 weeks of training. The first week I hit like a 6 at 6 on my straight leg deadlifts. The next week it was like a 7 at 6 or something, or 7 at 7. Now this week it was 8 at 7, and then next week's gonna be like 8 at 8, 8 at 9. Where it's like, why are we going up in reps? but doing that, I'm forced now to just slap on a little bit more weight and just do it. And I think a lot of athletes can shoot themselves in the foot, whether they're somebody who tends to undershoot or somebody who tends to overshoot. Speaking from more of the undershooting side, I think a lot of the anxiety kind of comes from that fear of like, it could be injury, it could be just kind of failing the lift, which fucking sucks. But I think part of overcoming yourself is kind of reminding yourself that like reminding yourself that you're a lot more capable of things than you actually are. And that if you are a technician, cool, trust that, just trust it. And if that means like maybe being a little bit more mindful of technique, during your lighter warm-ups, cool. But then by the time you get to your heavier shit, turn it on. Like it's go time pretty much. So that's how I think of things.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that like a good athlete will always use all their warm-ups, not just to warm up their body, but also to diagnose what small errors are being made on the day and use those as the opportunity to remedy them. Because lots of guys I can see they're just like, I hate warming up. I'm gonna do it as fast as I can. I'm gonna get it done. There's no thought put into it. And it's like, hey, if you're a really advanced athlete, your warm ups are a massive percentage of your total reps done per week.
Yep.
You're losing a ton of practice if you don't treat those as opportunities for practice, right? Because it's like lifting is fatiguing. We can't just go, swing our samurai sword for 1,000 repetitions. We only get so many squats in the week to practice. We need to take advantage of them. We can't spam infinite practice. So we need to really make sure that we are mentally present. And a lot of those are warm-ups, right? So I think all good athletes do that. I think maybe if you had a guy, if I saw a guy who was a great technician and was a bit of a head case intensity wise, I maybe might tell him to do the old school, just move all your warm-ups as fast as you can to try to get your nervous system fired, get hyped up. And it's like, let's try to get away from that neuroticism and like really move those fast. But for the most part, 9 out of 10 athletes are not such levels of technicians that they should be trying to do max speed warm-ups. As cool as it is to flex your super speedy 4 plates on your Instagram story, I'm guilty of it. Max is guilty of it. And our deadlifts were worse for the wear, trying to flex how fast we could move warm-ups rather than trying to prove to myself how well I can do my warm-ups and trying to figure out what, because it might be a different error than last week. It might not always be the same error. I might just have not enough weight in my forefoot. I might not be locking in the same level of extension in my mid back as I normally do. There's tons of things that I might be doing wrong. And if I'm not paying good attention, I'm sitting on my phone between warm-ups because I just view these as the things I have to do so my top sets don't hurt my back, then I'm not going to remedy those in time. And my top set is going to be bad. So 9 out of 10 athletes, I do think, yeah, screw your intensity on your warm-ups. Those are the ultimate opportunity to forego zero intensity, huge focus solely on your technique. And then it's like, okay, well, as we get closer, yeah, we probably do need to practice getting hyped up a little bit, right? Because it's like, it's probably bad for your top set or your top single to be your first time getting hyped up for the day. Specificity applies to literally everything. Just like we shouldn't do all of our warm-ups without our belt and put on our belt for our top set. It's going to throw us off. It's slightly different to be better practiced in a specific manner. Adrenaline, I believe, functions kind of similarly, right? So it's like most good athletes, they'll give themselves a little thigh slap before their last warm-up, just so it's not jarring psychologically when you get this big adrenaline dump on your top single, right? So it's like we want to be mirroring everything we can, and adrenaline follows suit. But we don't need to be dumping adrenaline for our speedy 3-plate warm-up. You're just going to be exhausted by the time you get to the top one and not have fixed anything. So it's like, yeah, I agree with you. I think that is very much like, basically, I think everybody should be chilling out and being a little bit more analytical on their warm-ups up to, I don't know, like 70%.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think I'll say that also guilty when I was a greener athlete. I do the same shit, thinking I was cool as fuck, when it's like, no one cares. But
it always starts the same way. You see someone else do it, and you're like, I think I can move 4 plates faster.
I can do it better.
I must be good because like,
gotta go fast.
Like they thought it was worth posting. So if they thought it was worth posting, and I'm better than they are, then mine is worth posting. And it's like, yeah, Max and I did the same thing. We just saw some guy did 3 plates, and he thought his 3 plates was the shit. I'm like, wait till you see my 3 plates. I can row that.
And then I mean, to your point too, it just sounds like what we're talking about is just refining the process, whether it's in the gym or out, whether you're warming up for a top set, warming up for, a heavy single, whatever it might be, or if it's making sure you have enough meals in the day, in the week, make sure you're hitting your protein goals and stuff like that. Like, that's really what it's about. It's not any one meal. It's not any one training session. It's not any one warm up. It's all of it. And that might sound overwhelming for some people, but just take it like one step at a time. And like,
well, yeah, it doesn't necessarily. Sorry.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say, like, yeah, just take it one step at a time for people, and it's like you're naturally going to get better because you are literally getting in your reps by doing that. And just the more volume you accumulate, the better you're gonna get at something.
Yeah, and it's like, you don't have to do everything at once. Not everything for everybody is of equal importance. Like, you and I started on the exact opposite end of the spectrum. I could put zero effort into working harder and put all of my effort into being more technical, or maybe vice versa for some people, right? And people will observe different variables carry different weights. So we can put more effort. Effort's probably a finite resource. I know that's a theory. Um, I don't know if that's an accepted theory, but I know I've been told it's a theory. So if we assume that in some capacity, effort's a finite resource, we should be allocating it to what variables are going to give us the most return. Just like how we shouldn't be using a massage gun and focusing on our diet and sleep. Diet and sleep might not be of equal weight for everybody. You might observe, I'm kind of naturally an overeater. So like I eat enough, even if I slack, I'm going to eat enough. But if I sleep bad, I'm screwed, right? My brother is that way, where it's like if anything, everything needs to be put behind sleep, right? Now we need to do everything well, but that doesn't mean we need to apply equal effort to everything, and that can make it a lot less underwhelming. Is you just pay attention. You're gonna like everybody that watches these videos cares about lifting and is pretty smart and cares about their training. These aren't the people that are just mindlessly doing stuff. If they're consuming an hour-long podcast from some random dudes that lift weights, you're pretty deep into this shit. I test your theory. You'll notice, like for me, it's that I sleep badly no matter what I do. So my diet needs to be on point, right? I could go to bed too late. I'm gonna sleep like shit, basically regardless. So but if my diet is off, I perform like terribly, absolutely awfully every time, like clockwork. So I will stay up late to eat a meal. And some people, Max would do the exact opposite. He would never stay up late to eat a meal because the sleep is more important. And so you can start to identify your own, like you said, it's a process, your individual process, not this universal process that we should all be doing the same thing. Your individual process might entail putting a ton more weight onto one specific thing until you kind of run that shit dry. And then you can start turning your attention to other variables once you've really, you're like, I do never miss a meal. Now I can start to worry about my sleep. I do this really, I engage intensity great. I should worry about my technique.
I'm kind of in a similar boat with you too when it comes to sleep. I've always had like, it's not sleeping in and of itself. I don't typically wake up super often when I am asleep in the middle of it. It's always the process of sleep for me.
I've got the exact opposite. I wake up like 30 plus times a night. Like
so it's not the process for you. Like you can fall asleep.
It's not like, I'm sure I fall asleep slower than the average person. It's not quick, but I do fall asleep eventually. But it's like I wake up probably 30 plus times a night. Like when I had a Fitbit, it was saying 50. I don't know if 50 is true, but it's at least 30 because I got a sleep study done, and I don't have sleep apnea. But it's been that way since I was a kid. So it's like I learned the other day that some people, like, they close their eyes and then they open them and it's morning time. I can say, hand over my heart, swear to God, that has never happened in my entire life.
I'm so sorry for you.
Yeah, that sounds.
Because when I sleep, I'm not fuck out. So Jesus, man. I watched your video the other day too. I remember you were talking about doing you've done everything when it's come to sleep. What has worked for you, dude?
I've seen a bunch of the standard stuff makes it slightly better. It's just never gotten to good, right? So I have good sleep hygiene, right? I've got the blackout blinds. I've got the cold room. I use a white noise. I know some people recommend against that, but a fan next to my head makes it so that any noises outside I can't hear. I just picked that up in college because obviously dorms, people are gonna wake you up in the middle of the night, just coming home late or something. So it's I just would drown that out, and I got used to it. I find that the vast majority of athletes probably should supplement magnesium, specifically magnesium glycinate. There's a couple other that are more bioavailable, similar to magnesium glycinate, and don't cause the laxative effects of the magnesium citrate. But I just think that sourced from a regular diet, just about nobody is getting enough magnesium unless you're gobbling almonds all day, or if you're eating oysters. I know oysters have a tremendous amount. Or pumpkin seeds. If you're trying to source it naturally, those would be the big three off the top of my head. But almost no one is doing that, and it's such it's a critical. It's necessary for muscle contraction. It's used in, I think, 1,000 plus chemical processes in your body, including a bunch for your brain, and it always correlates with better sleep. Just everybody should be probably having. I'm not a huge supplement shill, but magnesium is my jam. GABA. Have you tried GABA?
Dude, yes. So I do GABA.
I was gonna say GABA for sleep latency, like falling asleep.
Yeah,
I give a very good thumbs up too.
Have you tried L-theanine?
I have. I didn't even notice it.
Really? You didn't notice anything?
Nothing.
Interesting. Okay. I do both. I think I've tried taking them individually. I think I felt the most effect with GABA. L-theanine works for me though. And that's about the only thing I do. I used to do melatonin, but I would wake up in like a daze. It was super weird. And also like it would not put me to sleep. I know some people swear by it, but it just always like I felt like it like affected my like heartbeat and stuff like that too. I was just like, this does not feel right, and I'm probably never gonna take this ever again.
I'm trying right. I'll get back to you. I like to give things a pretty thorough try before I come to any conclusion. But somebody in my comments suggested I try apigenin, which off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure is a flavonoid, like a chemical compound like unique to fruit, and then you extract it and you condense it. I believe it. I hope I'm not messing up. And it's supposed to help with your sleep and whatnot. I figured I'd give it a try. I think flavonoids are generally just the most interesting thing in the world to me, that there are these unique compounds to fruits that have these varied effects from anti-cancer to anti-aging, and we don't understand, like, we have no idea like the breadth of what they do. I think it's fascinating. It's the best compelling argument ever for making sure you eat your fruits and veggies. Cool. You could say,
more assholes. Like you can't eat.
It's like I'll get my vitamin, because people will be like, I get my vitamin C from a vitamin, but it's like you can't get these cool little fucking magical things that we don't necessarily know everything they do, but they seem to do everything. They seem to they seem to be the shit. You probably can't eat enough of them. So yeah, no, I was bought in when somebody put it in my comments, and I said, "Oh, flavonoids are so cool. That was my favorite unit at school when we were talking about those in nutrition. This is my shit, so I bought them. I'll let you know if they do anything."
Cool, for sure.
Also, anybody who's buying supplements, go buy from iHerb. It's cheaper there than Amazon. Just a little random plug. I've always thought supplements were interesting. I don't think they do all that much, but they've always just been something that kind of scratched the itch. Because I think physiology is interesting. I just think they're interesting, really. I've always been broke, so like I haven't even tried most of the ones that I think are interesting, but I've always liked researching supplements. And if you're a supplement nut like I am, iHerb, you can get things for a much better deal.
Sick. We love a good plug. Yeah. Like for the longest time, I was pretty like anti-supplement, just because I just thought people like had way more things that they could focus on. But you know, once you do like have all those things dialed in, as like you guys have discussed in length, you know, those extra inches, like they make miles, like down the line. And like if you are able to refine your process and, you know, not just do things differently, but do the things that you're meant to do and do them well, that's how you find a lot of success. So one thing that kind of like came to me as you guys were discussing, kind of going back quite a bit into the discussion, you know, the intensity and discipline kind of thing. I never really put it in those terms, but I kind of like had similar talking points with a lot of my clients, and something that I wish I could do, like in my questionnaire when I onboard people and get to know them like initially. Obviously, programming as you go further along in the process, that's when you really get to know them and start making like actual personalization. But one thing that I wish, like, you know, I mean, it's pretty easy to do, but I want to kind of like ask them, send me form videos of these lifts. So in particular, I want to see how they perform on obviously their compound exercises, squat, bench, dead, overhead press, you know, rows, and at least one isolation lift. I want to see like kind of like how they put themselves toward the end of the set, like where they kind of cut off a set. Like I think those are kind of like good things to kind of look for, because like those are things I look for when people send me form videos. Besides just actual, you know, technique and form, it's like, where are you stopping your set? Like I'm not trying to have like say like, hey, that's not a real RPE7. It's just more like, hey man, like you didn't really get to a point where you actually struggled, and I just want to point that out to you. And or like where you think you struggled, it's like it looked the exact same as the rep before. So yeah, Sam.
I think that's something that's really interesting. I feel like there's more people in the modern era than ever that don't know how to do their like assistance work, because for the first time through the internet, people will walk into the gym and start powerlifting right away. Everybody used to kind of start with general training in the gym to get jacked. They used to start with bodybuilding, right? Whereas now at the powerlifting gym in town, there are people that the first introduction to weights was powerlifting specific training, right? And so it's really interesting because they'll be doing a pretty darn good job with their form and their intensity on their main exercises. And you're like, it's weird that this guy's plateaued. He seems to be doing a pretty good job. That's a bit odd. And then you see him do his accessories. It's like, oh, you just don't know how to bodybuild. You need bigger primary movers, and you don't know how to do basic bodybuilding. Not even bodybuilding training at a high level, which is super fast. And I think it's interesting. It's not my cup of tea. I've never done bodybuilding. It's always been a means to an end for strength training. But I don't need you to do high level bodybuilding. I need you to just do a decent looking 3x8 to 12. I know that's the old cliche, that's the brainlet bodybuilding. Holy shit, it works decent. I just need you to do some decent bodybuilding for your legs after your squat. I need you to do some decent bodybuilding for your pressing muscles after your bench. I need you to do some decent level bodybuilding. Just standard control the weights, full range of motion, decent intensity. Give me 3 sets of 8 to 15. I'm fine with that. You will grow from that because you're not that advanced from a bodybuilding perspective. And the number of people that just do not know how to do that because they started right away as a strength athlete and they can't connect with any of their muscles. There's a girl I coach here in Montana who's coming up on getting her first 2-plate bench press, and she's like only 145 pounds. So like a very solid competitive bench press. Like a decent level power lifter, like a 400 some dots, doesn't know how to bodybuild. No clue. Like I saw her do press downs the other day. I was shocked. I was like, you're gonna bench press 2 plates. You don't know how to do a press down and you don't know how to squeeze your tricep. You don't know how to feel your lats when you do a pull down. That's crazy.
Yeah. So I'm super glad you brought that up because that was me. Like I started off basically doing the big compounds first.
Max was the same way because he was like, it's like you're a big guy. You start horsing around some big weight. You're like, fuck yeah, this is my shit. I only look forward to the heavy stuff. Yeah. Max was like, tricep press downs. That's that little thing where you go like this afterward. Yeah.
And it's like, sure, like I grew a lot definitely from like doing my squats, doing my deadlifts and stuff like that. But I think the pitfall in my training. So I've been training since 2017. So that's 6 years ish. And I did my very first competition early 2018. And I would say probably the first half to 2/3 of my training, I probably did not know how to drive intensity that much on my accessory work. It wasn't until the past like year and a half where I really was just like, oh fuck, this is what it means. And I think a lot of that came from my programming and working with Paris and just kind of absorbing a little bit more YouTube fitness content too. Sam, your content, I think Joffrey, Very Showfield, he comes to mind too because that motherfucker takes everything to RP like a million. I remember watching one of his videos and I was just like, okay, that's I need to do that. Because isolation shit, like you can handle that. Anybody can handle that. I don't think like shoulders are probably one of my favorite things to train, as with most guys. It's one of my weak points. So I just like spamming the ever loving shit out of shoulders, and it's like you can never not do enough accessory work, in my opinion, when it comes to like something like an isolation movement or anything like that. And I think a lot of powerlifters, Sam, I'm gonna let you take that, but 1 second, bro. I think the thing that I teach or try to teach my clients that do come from that like powerlifting background, it's learning how to train like a bodybuilder on their accessory work, chasing the stretch, chasing the squeeze, learning how to go through the full range of motion, knowing that no, motherfucker, you're not done. You have 3 more fucking reps in you. You just need to push yourself and actually do it. And I'll cap it there for now.
What I noticed, there's a big trend as well. Am I correct in guessing that you said you started pushing hard on your accessories like a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
Am I correct in guessing that 2 years ago your bench was your worst lift by a lot?
Oh hell yeah, dude.
Because Max was the same. Max was the exact same way, right? Because it's like, that specific heavy training, that seems to work pretty. I don't think you're actually losing that much on your squat and your deadlift from this heavier, more specific training, and maybe underemphasizing your accessories a little bit. That does not work for the bench press.
No,
It
absolutely
leads to a
doesn't.
poverty bench every single
Yeah.
time. It's the same thing where, like, I think Max went through that same process about two and a half years ago, where he was just like looking at himself in the mirror. Max wants to total 2,500 in sleeves plus. Like, that's like, he believes he's capable. He's a big guy. He's got a big frame. He's got genetics. He got in early. And we've got 10 years, 15 years to go. He's still young. So it's like, I believe he's capable of it, right? But he's always had this zoomed out view of his career. He's like, well, am I doing what I need to? Am I on pace? Am I hitting the milestones? Because he wanted to hit like his 2,000 pound sleep total before 20. And we got that checked off. I know his next kind of big one that's like in his zoomed out career plan is he wants to hit a 2,200, or 1,000 kilo total while he's a junior. And he zoomed out for a second. He's like, man, I am not on pace to bench what I would need to. Why is that? And he like took a study. He's like, Sam, what do you think? We like self-critical. I was like, oh yeah, it's because you've got no upper body muscle because you don't do accessories. You know, it's like you need to learn, not just do them hard, but you need to do them well. Like you need to kind of check into, like, once you finish your bench practice, because I like kind of calling it practice.
Yeah.
There's something that entails and there's something that evokes where we're not just benching to build muscle and then, oh, we bench more because we have big muscles. It's also a skill, right? And I'm very guilty of used to think, oh, it's an exercise. So the exercise makes you stronger. And the only reason my bench could go up is because I got stronger. But it's like, no, it's also a bench practice. It's a sport. I don't even compete in it as a sport, but it's a sport for him. So it's like, okay, we'll continue doing your bench practice as you are. But then after you finish your bench practice, you need to then check into being a bodybuilder, but a bodybuilder that's a little weird and only cares about his tricep, pecs, and shoulders. And you need to do that to the best of your ability. You need to go watch videos and observe what they are doing, their intensity, their technique, how they're fighting to maintain position, how they're keeping stress on the muscle rather than defaulting into other muscle groups. You need to become high level at that. And he did that, and his bench went from 405 to 475. And it's like, okay, well, now we're kind of turning another corner in his training where it's like, okay, he's kind of finally getting to the point that I reached a while ago on my bench where it's like, okay, now we got to start leaning into the specificity a little bit more. We don't get to have the fun, obscure variation third bench day. It needs to be 3 close variations or 3 days of vanilla bench press at this point, because you have the machine you're operating is capable of more, right? So now we need to up our specificity, kind of push our intensity, keep our technique really clean to train that machine to do what it's capable of. But then there's going to come a point where, like, you got to get a bigger machine. You need to pivot how you're thinking about your training from, like, if you look at the training of like a high level 74 kilo guy, they're not allowed to get that machine much bigger. Their whole training revolves around taking this fixed quantity of muscle and leveraging our form and leveraging our neurology to lift as much weight as possible. But there's never dedicated phases to getting a bigger machine, right? And again, if we look to high-level athletes, a lot of them are past that point where they aren't, like, they're at their fixed size, they're at that weight class. Like, they'll run hypertrophy phases, but they're not trying to get the machine much bigger. So guys who are younger and are looking to these good guys for inspiration will copy them and miss out on the fact that no. It's not that you're really inefficient at using your machine. Your machine sucks. It's dinky and small. You got to get a bigger one. You got to get a bigger meat suit, and then later on we can ramp up that specificity, right? So it's like right now Max is at the point where his meat suit is capable. The fact that Max can't bench press 500 is pathetic. How big that guy is. Like, maybe one of you guys will see Max at some point in real life. The guy is massive. I never met a natural person with more muscle on their frame than Max does. Obviously, it's because he's fat, but it's like no one has. I've never seen somebody with more muscle than Max. It's crazy. And the fact that he can't bench 500 is a perfect testament to, like, okay, it's not the muscle suit. It's you need to get better at bench pressing, right? I'm sure you guys have met some guys who are like, you're gnarly strong. I got no business benching as much as you. You should practice that a little bit more. Like there was a guy I knew who could overhead press 405, and then he couldn't bench within like 100 pounds of me. And I was like, you need to practice benching for a little bit, and I promise I should not be able to outbench you, dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's really impressive. Something I do want to kind of bring up and get like your guys' thoughts on as well is, so something that I've kind of picked up from watching your guys' videos and some discussions I've had with you behind the scenes is you guys use some type of block style periodization approach. And to my knowledge, that's kind of what you are use for yourself and also like for your clients as well. But I know that it's not like super dogmatic. I'm sure you guys don't believe in some hokey pokey magic shit behind block. But what made you kind of choose a block approach for how you like to organize your training? And what are some of the, let's say, decisions that you make going into that approach? So like, what is your goal setting like, your decision making? How do you auto regulate and make these like decisions like as you are transitioning between these phases? Like essentially, what is the benefits to using block in your opinion, and how do you make it or cater it to like the way you guys like to train and the goals you have, of course?
I'll take this one. I've used it because I've found the most success with it. So like I'm not open to other systems of training. It's just what I've found the most success with right now. I think something that I'm actually like curious in trying to do myself. I know Paris has talked about this before, where he basically has like a 9-day like training cycle or like training week. Like I don't really do something like that. And this might go outside of your question a little bit, but I'm sure there might be a point where it's like that might actually be useful. I should figure out like what it's like to actually run that so that I can have that personal experience, and so that I can give that to other potential clients or athletes that may be in that similar spot where it's like, yeah, dude, I'm just not recovering from, training on a 7-day schedule. It's like, okay, well, shit. Like, how do we work around that? Cool. I know, because I've had that experience personally. So as far as it goes right now, like it's just what I've had the most success with in my experience of training this far. As far as like training other people, I think generally speaking, it just fits people's schedules more. Like a lot of my clients, like they work, they have lives, they have 9-to-5s, they might have families. It's like, yes, like they might be, I have some clients that are probably really driven in their powerlifting careers, and others where it's like, hey dude, I don't want to be 50 and like broken. So I think it's just kind of convenient for most people across the board to use a block system, where for me, it's like 4-week blocks, and we kind of space out the progression there. There are certainly some clients where it's like, okay, maybe you need more time than just 4 weeks in order to progress. And so I'll just bleed that over into the next block. So it's not just block 1 and block 2 are drastically different. They might need more time, and that's totally okay. But if I have a client where it's like, okay, you can make progress in 4 weeks, no problem. Cool, like let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I started it just because it was logical to me, right?
Yeah.
You've got a conundrum that you face a little bit into training, right? Where you're like, okay, I've got this idea of maybe depending on how you started, I add weight every day, and then you add weight every week to a fixed scheme. Now, that stops working, and you have this great existential question. Congratulations, you now need to have some kind of periodization. What kind of periodization do you do? And I, being the genius that I was like, it sounds really smart to do 3 sets of 8. And then when I fail to add 5 pounds, I'll do 3 sets of 5. And then when I fail to add 5 pounds, I'll do 3 sets of 3. And then I just invented block periodization. And then I learned like Ed Cohn and like traditional American block periodization, this idea of like, hey, you got about 10 weeks, 12 weeks. You start at 60, you hopefully end at 101%, rinse and repeat. I was like, okay, that's just a more refined version of the solution to that issue that I thought was logical. So I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to take and run with, because it's what I find logical. I don't want to do something I find illogical, right? And then, like you said, like what do you start to do from there? Well, you determine how many times a week you should be doing a lift. You determine how many sets per session you're doing. You do kind of taper that across the block. Like I said, 60 to 100 is pretty standard stuff. Some athletes will start as low as 50 if they're really bad at reps. Some athletes will start as high as 70, but we start around 60, 65 as a starting point. We take pretty linear jumps. We do some background accessory work the whole time. And then we basically look at the level of the athlete, and we can kind of expect, well, what is our rate of progression, right? Because we can no longer add 5 pounds a week, which I'm devastated about, right? It becomes, okay, well, we can no longer add 5 pounds a week, but we should be stronger on week 3 this time than we were on week 3 last time. So it's added weight every 10 weeks. And we should be able to kind of guesstimate what we feel is an appropriate rate of progression for how advanced we are as an athlete. If someone's very new, I would expect each training cycle to lead to a 20 plus pound PR, right? And if they are failing to achieve that, we need to take a hard look at their variables and like, hey, dude, you should be able to progress faster than this. Someone gets a little bit more advanced. We should expect a rate of about 10 pounds per training cycle. If we exceed that, awesome, we're doing it again. If we fall short of getting 10 pounds stronger, then we are going to assess our variables. That's where we tweak the program. If we fall short of what we deem to be an appropriate rate of progression, okay, we don't want to be an idiot. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. We fell shy of our desired rate of progression. We make adjustments. If we hit that, we're running the same protocol verbatim, just with a new number entered, right? And then get advanced, and it's like, all right, 5 pounds every 10 weeks. I'm happy with that shit. So it's like, that's kind of what I do. If I get 5 pounds stronger in 10 weeks, I do the same thing again. If that does not yield my 5 pounds, I make adjustments based on where I felt short. And you can kind of overlay phases into this 10-week structure. The first 4 weeks, 60 to 75%. That's a hypertrophy phase. It's not truly like block periodization in that each one is a separate thing. They're kind of titles I overlay into phases of a bigger progression from 60 to 100. They're just kind of descriptors. They're not concrete blocks that are fundamentally any different, because I want them to naturally flow from one into another. So calling them separate entities doesn't make sense. It's just kind of a label for a certain phase of the block, because the linear progression continues right through them. So they're kind of the same thing. It's just a way to describe and conceptualize what our goals are at different phases in the block, right? Because it's like what you're thinking about doing for the first 4 weeks, a little bit more bodybuilding, like our intensity might be a little bit lower. We have these different focuses, and how we're approaching our sessions is to be a little different. So labeling that the hypertrophy phase kind of invokes people the goal of that big portion of the block. It's not necessarily that it's a unique part of it. And that week right there, that's the strength block. There's in-betweener weeks that are training for both qualities. All of the weeks are calling for both qualities, right? That's kind of the thing about block periodization, is you can call it a strength block, but we're still doing accessories. That means we're still aiming for hypertrophy. They're not discrete qualities. We're just focusing on them in different ratios. And the ratios we focus on, those kind of flow naturally across the training cycle. We look for our +5. We make adjustments as we need to. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Now, am I probably going to outgrow that eventually? Sure, but I haven't yet. And none of my athletes have. I think that there's a point at which you get to the absolute upper echelons of advancedness, and things need to become more flexible, where you start looking at more bottom-up programming strategies, like emerging strategies, the RTS stuff. The idea of, rather than structuring things from top down, where we have a fixed block length, where we make things more reactive to how we're responding, that you see a lot of the best coaches in the USAPL doing nowadays. Eventually, something like that might become necessary. But goddamn, I like block periodization, just traditional American block. It's worked pretty darn good for me. Even if I couldn't hit a 5 pound PR every training cycle, I might just not max at the end of one and then look for 5 the next. A PR every other training cycle, if that's what I've deemed to be based on my variables and based on my level of advancement. If that sounds like a good rate of progression to me, cool, I'll do that. I'm sure there are other ways to, there's other ways to, I don't know. I was trying to come up with an analogy. I can't come up with it. There's other ways to do it. But that's the way I do it, because I find it logical. Rather than trying to be a master of a bunch of different periodizations, I think you're just going to be mediocre at all of them. If you if you're someone who's like, well, I give this guy, he's got daily undulating. I give this guy conjugate, because I'm a flexible coach. Because the best coaches, they're never dogmatic. They'll give any periodization style. And it's like, that's how you be really unfamiliar with the nuance of any of them. Because the coaches most of the best coaches I know, they have a method. And sometimes that method, there's flexibility within it, of course, right? Like, you're not going to have everybody do the exact same squat frequency, but they're not going to go outside that method because they feel bad charging people for something that's outside of their wheelhouse, right? So they've got some amount of play, but they're like, this is my method. If this method is a bad fit for you as an athlete, I might be a bad fit for you as a coach. And I have enough demand being a good coach that I'm going to turn you away because I think you should get some more value for your money. And I'm looking for an athlete that meshes well with how I do things, because I would like to be very good at the way I do things rather than mediocre at a bunch of things.
Yeah, I think to your point that you just said, I think there's definitely, like, if you're an athlete out there that's looking for a coach, I think understanding the coach's style of training, I think is really important, especially if you know it's something that, like, either you're specifically looking for that because maybe you lack certain qualities that they're talking about, and you wish to, like, grow and learn from those qualities, or if you just know how you like to have things run. Like, for me, like, if I'm working with somebody, I prefer having my block up front, like, just all 4 or 5-ish weeks. I hate when it's like week by week by week. I know some people prefer it, and it's definitely like you can be more dynamic with that, but I'm just like, bro, just write me a game plan. Let me follow through with it because I want to know where my training's headed. If we need to make adjustments, we can. So to your point, I think blocks are a good way to just kind of organize things. But as far as, like, implementation and stuff like that goes, it's not like pivoting, like, to the opposite ends of a stimulus or jumping to it a completely different stimulus, block from block from block. There's going to be some gradual overlay. And I think a lot of that depends on, if somebody has a meet coming up, that's a hard date in time. We have to accommodate for that. If somebody doesn't, we can probably be a little bit more fluid. We can probably play it by ear, see how they're responding. They're getting a lot out of higher reps right now. Cool. That's kind of like what you were saying. Let's keep running it, have different numbers in mind. But if they're getting a lot out of this style of programming, cool, like, let's just keep doing it until we kind of sense it might run out, or until we hit a certain, like, number criteria, a certain PR for, however many reps and whatnot. That's kind of how I like to think of things. It's like, hey, we're running, I don't know, pause deads. And let's say the goal by the end of this is to hit, maybe a single, in the case of maybe like a power lifter, let's hit a single that's, a couple kilos shy of, like, maybe your all-time best. Let's hit something decently heavy. We can call it an ability PR. And if you hit that, great. Now let's pivot and let's move on to something more specific, because you've shown me that we've exhausted that stimulus already. Like, you've gotten to that point. Like, you've achieved what we sought out to achieve. Then we can run, with something else.
Yeah, I really like all those points, because sometimes I think when it comes to, as you mentioned, Sam, like, when people try to, like, implement and kind of program hop, I think that people who are truly program hopping and, like, getting the worst, like, possible results from program hopping, they're popping programs that try to utilize these different types of periodization, and they never really understand any of them. So they do conjugate for a little bit, then they do volumizing schemes, and then they try to settle for linear and then block, and then they are too rigid with those distinctions. So I think, like, having it put forward by you both is, like, really useful for a lot of the people listening. And then one thing that I wanted to kind of cover, like, to bring it a bit, like, back slightly, since you two are way more systematized and advanced in and refined in your systems, what are some of the things that you guys do on a daily basis? So to kind of introduce that topic and what I kind of mean, like, me right now, I'm trying to lose weight. I'm trying to get so I started in around, like, 275, 277 back in May. I'm 265, 263 right now. I'm getting those consistent weigh-ins. And the things that have helped the most, we're just doing some of the same things every single day. So for one, like, I've made my breakfast and my lunch automatic. I don't even think about what they are. I know what they are every single day. It's either a bowl of fruit and Greek yogurt, or a protein shake and some cereal with skim milk. Like, that's it. Those are my only 2 options. And then when it comes to my lunch, it's literally just a, like, fist-sized sandwich. And then I have a really big dinner, because that's, like, post-training. And I do train like, in the morning, so I try to have most of my carb sources around that morning workout, and a lot of my other nutrients closer to my time of sleep. And that has done the absolute most in terms of helping my training along, but on also, like, helping me actually get my weight down, because I'm basically a perma cutter. Essentially, I keep starting and failing cuts. But right. So, but, like, yeah, just doing those same things every single day has been the biggest change. So what are some of the things that you think people can like implement in their daily routines now that you think would be the most beneficial to them?
Sam, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can take a run at it. So I mean, I guess I'm trying to do everything I can to leverage getting stronger because I'm an idiot and I got nothing else to do. So I think what you could do is you could take my very over the top approach and then kind of downscale it to what is the least you could do to derive some of the benefit. Because it's like through the day, I eat 6 meals. All 6 meals are roughly the same with varied fruits or micronutrient variability. The bulk of my protein comes from red meat, obviously micronutrient density, stand efforting, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's kind of heard that whole talking point. Yeah, like my diet is very, very similar to the vertical diet, just with more fruit, which I found to be very helpful I know he advocates for intake of fruit through the day because it has like a stimulatory effect on the liver. It has a good impact on energy levels. I like to spam a little bit of extra fruit because flavonoids are super cool. And also, I just found that I would tally my micronutrients on the vertical diet, and I'd still come a little shy on the potassium. So implementing a variety of fruit, something like pineapple has enzymes that are going to help you break down your protein, anti-inflammatory effects, as well as just vitamin C. Lots of cool. Every fruit has these cool effects, and you can justify any fruit you like. So that's kind of a staple for me. But like for me, the first thing was, okay, I need to increase my meal frequency to get stronger because I'm the opposite. I'm a perma bulker. I was about 140 pounds when I started at 5'10". I was very skinny. It was always very hard for me to gain weight, and I've never done a cut ever in my life. I accidentally lost weight every time I took my foot slightly off the gas pedal. But the first thing I needed to do was, okay, I'm not just a regular person now. I'm trying to become a unusually big, strong guy. What would I imagine a big, strong guy would do? I imagine a big, strong guy would eat more than 3 meals. That just sounds like something he would do. He would probably eat a lot of meat. That just sounds like something big, strong guys would generally do. So I'm going to try to be a big, strong guy. I'm going to adopt his habits, and I'll gradually morph into him. I would say that if he was really diligent, the big, strong guy would also probably eat vegetables with every meal. So I eat vegetables with every meal. I eat some fruits with it too. And then it's like I'm pretty big on like, so it's like what specifically you eat. Macros come first, then micros, and digestion falls somewhere in between there. You build a diet that you can follow consistently. I have the utmost consistency. I put a lot of emphasis on my digestion, but people could derive the benefits by just taking incremental steps towards what they imagine a big, strong guy would look like, a big, strong guy would eat. Or the reverse, if you want to be a lean guy, you could make some assumptions about what habits and what dietary habits a lean guy would have. You say, I guess the lean guy would probably eat a little bit less than I do. I should probably eat a little bit less. I imagine the lean guy would eat a bigger volume of vegetables than I do for satiety. I'll eat a little bit more vegetables. And it's like, you have these big concepts already in your head. You just need to start implementing them. But for me, I guess kind of bottom down, nutrition was the biggest thing for me my whole career, which was upping my meal frequency because there was no way I could eat enough in 3 meals to get what I needed. So meal frequency has always been the fix-all for my inability to gain weight. Just need to eat more often for smaller servings, and the amount you can eat in a day will be greater. So meal frequency, protein intake, sourcing those meals from whole foods, boom, pow, you get the nutrition handled. I'm big on managing my hydration status more than most people do. There's a certain amount of water I like to have drank before I go to the gym, which is 2.5 liters. And then there's a certain amount of water I like to have drank in total for the day before I go to bed. The equation that I've always used, there's nothing magic behind it. There's no studies to back this, but the equation I use is for every calorie you burn during the day, you drink 1 milliliter of water. So if you are a guy who is a big, strong guy, you're eating 4,000 calories, 4 liters of water probably will do a decent job for you. And the reason I like that is because it accounts for activity levels. People with high activity levels have high caloric expenditures. People with high activity levels sweat more and they need a greater water intake. I try to make sure my electrolyte intake is proportionate alongside that water. So I salt my meals. I make sure I'm sourcing potassium. Sometimes I'll throw some pink salt in my water. And I really try to take it serious to make sure I've drank a certain amount of water before I go to the gym. And I noticed when I started doing that, I haven't really strained many muscles since, knock on wood. So I'd say the nutrition, what you could learn from me, you don't have to be a nutcase like I am and measure every milliliter of water you drink during the day. but try to go through your water bottle twice before you go to the gym. Make sure you get some salt. Make sure you get some potassium. Have a source for your magnesium. Eat meals that you assume a muscle man would eat, and one day you might become a muscle man, right? Mobility, probably not the most important thing in the world. I was just saying earlier to you that if you stay in good shape, you tend to be a little bit more limber. So sometimes people who are chronically tight think they need to commit 30 minutes a day to mobility when they're actually better off taking that 30 minutes and doing some steady state cardio, get their aerobic condition in reasonable shape, and suddenly those mobility deficits go away without doing any stretching. But I do a little bit because I've got specific things that are quite difficult for me now that I'm heavier. I spend 5 minutes sitting down at the bottom of a third world squat every day. I think most people could benefit from just spending some time down there, getting some familiarity, getting some length through the back of the legs will help a lot of people alleviate their butt wink relatively quickly. So, your mobility routine, probably not the best thing to stress about, but if you can spend some time at the bottom of a squat while you brush your teeth, probably a good use of time. I have a lot of stuff I do to try to keep my overhead mobility. Being a guy who has a big bench press, but also needs to have a good overhead position is very difficult. And that's why I'm kind of leaning towards specializing into one at a time. So I'm like doing a real bench specialized phase of training for the rest of this year, or however long it takes me to bench press 600. And then I'm going to back off of benching a good bit, and I'm going to focus on my overhead strength, maybe like a push jerk or a split jerk, push press and a strict press for strongman reasons. But unrelated, I have to do a lot of overhead mobility. But I think most people can get away with just doing a little bit for their T-spine every day, hanging out in the bottom of a squat. Boom, you've gotten most of the benefits of stretching they give you. Don't stress too much about that. Walks through the day is massive. Trying to make sure that you take your steps. If you're someone whose lifestyle kind of has that automatically built in, don't worry about it. If you're someone who works a desk job, you better be getting up and walking down the block during your smoke break that you're legally required to have, during your lunch after you finish eating. Once you finish your shift, put down your pre-workout meal, walk around the block before you go to the gym or walk on the treadmill. There's probably 4 windows most people with a sedentary job can fit in a quick walk, and it makes a massive, massive difference for the aches and pains you're going to experience from having a desk job. If you take those 4 walks, Max just sets a 40-minute timer, and every 40 minutes he just kind of touches his toes a little bit and does a lunge because he sits all day for his work. And it's like if you just on your smoke break, your lunch right after work, and then before bed, go for a walk, boom, wow, you're probably at 10,000 steps, which is where the number of steps up until which we've observed better and better and better health outcomes. The more output you have, the better the lower the all-cause mortality, the better the health outcomes. Let's get those. If they also being healthy is really good for training, which people don't seem to believe because they're like, oh, but like look at super heavyweight powerlifters. They're the strongest guys and they're really unhealthy. Well, let me let you in on a little secret, right? Like the guys at World's Strongest Man, you're right. They're walking heart attacks. They're on a boatload of PEDs. That is not the picture of health. But I will tell you, yes, you have to be a 400-pound man on a bunch of steroids to be at World's Strongest Man and lift really heavy weights. But the healthiest of all of the 400-pound men on steroids, which is like, that's not great. That's a low standard. But the healthiest of the guys who tolerate that best, are usually the guys who are winning, right? The fact that Hafthor was a semi-comfortable 420 pounds and was healthful at that weight and wasn't wild like a blob was a lot of the reason he was able to win, right? Yeah, there's certain things we have to do to adhere to like a super heavyweight powerlifting at the highest level or a strongman at the highest level. And those things are unhealthy. But the healthiest of the bunch have a huge advantage because those are the guys that can do more training and recover and benefit from. Because there's the old George Hackenschmidt quote, the guy who invented the bench press, who said like strength can never be divorced from health, right? And people are like, haha, fat powerlifters disprove that. It's like, no, you should still be trying to be as healthy as you can, given the parameters that you're functioning within, and it's going to let you recover better. And being healthy correlates with better recovery. So it's like, is my health perfect? No. Do I strive to be as healthy as I can for someone who's heavier than he's supposed to be? Absolutely, because it does correlate with better performance. We should be striving to be healthy. There are compromises we may make in our health to pursue specific goals in our athletic career, but we should still be trying to be healthy. And so get those steps in. It's really important, I promise. It's like people are like, oh, like less steps means more recovery. Fuck no, it doesn't. It means being an out of shape mess with like an 80 resting heart rate. You're not going to recover from shit. Like the fact that, oh, I didn't move all day. That's how I recovered. Move a little bit, please.
Love it.
I just want to say I love your mindset when it came to like, okay, what would somebody that's big and strong do with their nutrition? They'd probably eat a lot. What would they eat a lot of? They'd eat a fuck ton of meat. I love that, man. I absolutely love that. Just so I am sure what you asked, Karel, could you remind me, what was your initial question?
Like, what are some everyday things that you think people can start with, as far as like things that they should refine in their own process, and repeat and get better at on a daily basis, like that will change and improve their training?
Yeah, I'll talk about some things that I've currently been doing that have helped me a lot. Most of which is just kind of automating, kind of like what you were saying, Karel, automating what I eat. So like my breakfast is pretty consistent across like all days of the week. Same goes for my lunch. It's usually like, so I get in 3 meals a day. I'm actually thinking about making it 4 just for the sake of digestion and just not having to force feed myself like after my training, and just to make sure I'm actually fueled enough prior to training. There have been some days where like I don't even realize it, but I only get in like 900 calories before I like go to train, and I train around like 3 p.m. maybe like 5 p.m. and it's like that's not good. So I am trying to bump it to 4. But what I do right now, like I will meal prep. I will make the time to do it. I will meal prep my lunches. It's literally just, at least as it stands right now, I'll take like a pound of ground meat that can range, depending on what I go for, anywhere from like 80 to 100 grams of protein. And I just cook the shit out of it, however I decide to cook it, and I just have it ready for me. And day in, day out, it's just, okay, cool. Like I'll have something for breakfast. Right now it's a bottle of like a high protein Fairlife milk, a little 16-ounce bottle from Costco, comes in really clutch, 30 grams, easy right then and there, and some kind of like lean chicken sausage or some shit. And that's about it for breakfast. And I'll have coffee because I love caffeine. And then lunch will just be like, yes, a pound of ground meat, and I'll have that meal prepped. And dinner could be something a little bit fancier, but same goes there. It's just making sure I have a protein source, just so I can hit my 280 to 300 grams ish of protein a day. And as far as protein goes for most people, I think at bare minimum, people should be getting at least like 1 gram per pound of body weight at bare fucking minimum. If you want more, I prefer more. I just like eating meat. I just like having a lot of protein. That's why I'm kind of leaning more towards that 300 end. But I think that's something people can do to just better refine their systems. Just, take that number, that multiplier, that 1 times body weight, and just divide it across 3-4 meals, and just see how that works for you, see how you can make it fit. Groceries wise, like my groceries are pretty consistent. I pretty much get the same things all the time. It's like if I don't want to especially if I don't want to overeat something, it's just out of sight, out of mind. Like, don't even go down the aisle of certain things. It's just make sure I get my produce, make sure I get my meat sources, my carbs, and then get the fuck out of there. And that's kind of what I do, is just automate my nutrition. Sleep, same thing, like have a process with it. We were chatting about this before, Sam, but every night I'll have like 8 ounces of water. I'll mix my GABA, I'll mix my L-theanine, I'll chug that, probably unwind, and then just knock the fuck out. For me, it's I'm a very chaotic person sometimes. So for me, it's like if I have a routine, like my quality of life just improves so much. Whether it's being able to sleep for 6 to 8 hours, like a solid 6 to 8, and not like waking up in the middle of it, or just being in bed at 10 and then I'm not asleep till like 1 a.m. It's just those little things really help. So I think having a routine is important. Nutrition wise, like just make sure you get in your protein at bare minimum, following that 1-to-1 ratio. And then if you're somebody that's struggling with sleep, I know a lot of people do, not enough of my clients get enough sleep, having a routine there too. So I think that's kind of it for me. What's up, dude?
Tag on what you said. My girlfriend Kirsten actually just put a video up on my channel today where she talked about this a little bit, and
nice.
I thought that this was very relevant, right? You say and I say 1 gram per pound of body weight, right? of protein intake, but some people find that very daunting because that is a very different dietary habit than what people who are normal people are doing.
Yeah.
Right. And just like we talked about earlier, that doesn't need to be overnight. Don't beat yourself up. If you're a newbie, you could eat, if you're probably averaging like 60 grams of protein a day, just aim for 100. You'll get way better results from just going to that 100 and then bump it up. You don't need to go straight there because you're going to hear advanced athletes all the time telling you about like, this is my diet, this is his diet. My diet is extremely regimented because I hate food. I don't season anything. I just don't like eating. I never have. That's why I struggled to gain weight. So I eat the exact same unseasoned food 6 times a day, and it's gotten me phenomenal results. But you don't need to do that. And you also don't need to jump to any of these crazy diets. And that's not what most of us did. Most of the people will tell you where we're at now, but that process of getting better at dieting actually looks a lot more stepwise. It was, okay, I got into the gym. I should eat more protein. I'm going to aim for 100. I'm not going to track my calories. I'm not going to eat clean foods. I'm just going to eat some extra protein with every meal. I get to 100. Maybe we put, so it's like, okay, we're kind of vaguely tracking protein. Maybe we don't even track it. Maybe we just make a conscious effort to have an extra egg or two with our breakfast, put some extra slices of turkey on our sandwich for lunch, and ask mom to put some extra beef in the ravioli for dinner or some shit, right? Yeah. It's like that might be your legitimate intervention to improve your gains. And then we start tracking a little bit. Maybe we only track protein, and we get that protein up. And then maybe we start tracking calories in protein, right? Just kind of in an observing way, and we're trying to push it in a certain way. And then maybe we notice our digestion is kind of shitty, following like a old school, if it fits your macros, hit your carbs with with Pop-Tarts and shit. Maybe we start doing like a modified if it fits your macros, where we hit our macros from a target list of potential options. I've got like 5 protein sources. You know, like if I burn out on beef, I can have chicken. If I burn out on chicken, I can have fish. And I can rotate those because I'm not so deep into it that I'm going to eat the same thing every day. I can rotate my protein sources, but I've got a protein target that I'm hitting from a list of things I know treat me well. I've got a list of carb sources I know treat me well. And then eventually maybe we get into tracking everything. And then maybe we get into our diet looking really similar day to day. But this, for almost everybody, unless you're a really weird person like I am, you're not going to just start eating nothing but like optimal food. It's a stepwise process of like finding, like maybe you're in high school still. You ask your friends if you could have their milk carton. That is a legitimate intervention at your level right now. Like eat like drinking your milk carton plus your buddies. Boom, that's an extra bit of protein that will help over time. Asking, like, put an extra milk on your cereal. Like, there's so many things that are part of this process that you can get down on yourself and never even make those small interventions, because you hear all the good guys say these massive interventions. Just start building towards it, man. Just try to get better each day in small increments, and you'll end up at this level of, if you really want to take it this far, you're going to be at this eventually. You're going to have to be like us and eat like weirdos, wears everywhere. But it's like eventually you're going to have to go down that road. You don't need to yet, man. Just take those, like, those are legitimate interventions. You should never put somebody down for saying like, oh yeah, I'm trying to bulk up, so I like have an extra egg or 2 at breakfast. That's awesome. That's like, that isn't like a robust diet overhaul, but like doing habit after habit after habit is what gradually morphs into being a great lifter, right? It's like no one thing that we implemented over time sounded like that big and inspiring, but by the time your routine looks kind of crazy, it sounds inspiring. But it was really just small options. I go to bed a little earlier. I got to drink a little bit more. I got to drink water before training. Because it sounds, as people say, it sounds overwhelming for me to say I have a certain amount of milliliters of water I drink before training and before I go to sleep. But it's like, really, I tweak the muscle one day. It's like I should probably drink more water before I go to the gym. How much water do I drink? And I first started with I had a water bottle. I don't know how many milliliters it was. I drank it once. Felt like I probably should have drank more. I drank it twice. Felt pretty good. I drank it 3 times and noticed I had to pee every 20 minutes. It's like, okay, cool. I'll drink this 2 times before I go to the gym every day. And then I was like, wait a minute. I feel great at the gym because I drank water, but then I don't drink any water for the rest of the day. So then I started implementing amount of water after training. And it's like, then I kind of I assigned numbers to it eventually, just to kind of know what's going on. You might never even assign numbers. If you feel great with 2 water bottles before training and 2 water bottles before bed, that is a legitimate tracking your water intake. Just because you can't tell me the number, or just like how there are some guys that are wicked strong that can't tell me how many grams of protein they eat, but it's a lot. Like I know a guy who has no idea how much protein he's eating. I guarantee that motherfucker's near 400 grams because he's like, I'm trying to get big and strong. So he eats like a 12 egg omelet with like beef in it for breakfast. He like eats this just a massive fucking bowl of meat for lunch, and then he eats like a bunch of lasagna for dinner. I guarantee he's getting a ton. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm trying to be a strong man, so I eat a lot of protein. I'm like, oh, really? How much? He's like, I have no idea, but it's a lot. That works weirdly well. And like, if you're a numerically minded person, that might stress you out to not know. And that's awesome. Count it, cool. You might be the kind of person you're like, fuck, I don't care. It's a lot. It's more than you. Like that was his whole rationale. Is he's like, well, I see how much other guys are eating. I don't know how many grams of protein it is, but I eat way more meat than they do. I'm sure I'm fine. I'm not going to worry about what the number is. And that is a legitimate approach, right? As much as we like to all sound like we're like the science-minded guys on the internet, because that makes you sound more correct. It makes you sound like a smarter guy. If you're getting your ass kicked by the guy that's just eating a bunch of meat, you're still losing, even if you sound smart. So it's like what works is what matters to me. Obviously, I like numbers. I just like to know. But like really, it's an individual process for every single person listening to get better. And it's like what exactly you could like, how you do it really can be a ton of ways. Like I said, some people never even track. I describe that process of building into tracking that I feel most people go through. But this guy deadlifts more than me, and he doesn't never track anything in his life.
That's great. I think I'm glad we both touched a little bit on where we came from and how we got started, because something that I want to tell people is that, like we were talking about, it's a process. There's steps to these things. There's different levels to it. You know, I didn't start outright, just eating 280, 300 grams of fucking protein a day in the example that I did. Like no one starts just, squatting, deadlifting, benching with perfect form either. Like in the beginning, you're going to make mistakes, and that's totally okay. It's kind of like what you say, Karel. It's starting where you stand and then just gradually going and growing from there. And Sam, to your point, like it can look like if you're trying to pack on a little bit more mass, if you're trying to be a little bit more mindful of protein, yeah, it probably does look like an extra egg or two in the morning, or drinking a little bit more milk from your buddies and taking it from their lunch and stuff like that. It's just accept where you are now, and then take the steps to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, build from where you're at right now. Don't build from what you think you should be doing.
Yeah,
right? Because what you should be doing is always going to be a few steps away. Look at what you're doing right now. Look at what you eat right now, and just add the extra egg. Take away the muffin if you're trying to cut. Like, just take what you're actually doing and take singular steps day after day, and you'll reach what you should be doing. But it becomes overwhelming, and people will jump in, and it's just unsustainable to make 8 changes at once to go straight to what they should be doing from what they actually were. And it's like build from where you're at. It's the same as training. I want to bench 700 pounds. I can't go load 650. Like you need to build from where you're at. Unfortunately, everything is like, it needs to be incremental. You need to earn the right to go to the next step. Just because you want something doesn't mean you can just jump to it.
That's what I say to my powerlifters, because it's like,
just because you want to be. Yeah, go ahead.
They have these like crazy numbers in mind. They want to be the best powerlifter in the world. And it's like, I believe you. Like I believe the intent and effort is there, but we're not there yet. Like you have to do the grunt work right now. Sorry, but like you gotta get some dirt in your hands. You gotta eat some shit. Everyone
talk some smack real quick.
Oh yes.
What is it? In my questionnaire for new clients, my first question is, what are your goals?
Yep.
I have had several people tell me, like, I want to be a world record holder or the world's strongest man.
Yeah.
Every single person that answered that burnt out insanely fast. There's something that about the kind of person that says that without truly understanding how much work those guys have. It's almost disrespectful to the people that are the world's strongest man. But you say that passively, like that's your goal, but you're not prepared for that level of work. You don't even understand that level of work. Like, yes, they're genetic freaks, but oh my God, they've done a lot of work in their life.
Yeah,
right. And so it's like, it always cracks me up that it's like the people with the craziest goals. I always worry when I get one. Like some of them have stuck through and gotten real strong, and like I love them. But like, I'm always so worried when I see I want to hit the heaviest team total ever. I'm like, are you close? And they're like, not yet. I'm like, okay. That's it's a red. Like I'm not even saying you couldn't do it. I'm saying the fact that that was your answer just seems to correlate with really bad outcomes. I don't know why, but like I've seen this time after time after time after time. Like I'm like, should I send it back if I see World's Strongest Man 2025? That's the goal. Like,
Amazing.
It's kind of like that whole yeah, it's kind of like I don't get me wrong, I do appreciate the mindset, and I do like kind of like it where it's the whole like shoot for the moon, because even if you'll miss, you'll land among the stars type deal. But at the same time, some people are shooting way beyond that, but they're not even like in a rocket ship essentially. Like they're still on a bike. Like just like you're not gonna get there like with your current capacities. We gotta like like your machine analogy kind of thing. So we're about over that 2-hour mark. So there's 2 questions I kind of want to ask. Like I do have time for the 2. If not, then we can like cut it to 1. So one of them is kind of like more of a for fun kind of thing, since we're on the topic of diet. And the second one is a little bit of a hot take. I kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on, because you guys are genuinely advanced. So the first one is, all right, you have to pick between one of these for the rest of your life as like your biggest source of like a high calorie meal. All right, this is probably going to be more relatable between me and Andrew, because we actually love food and we can't handle unseasoned food.
Yeah, Sam, I can't do that shit.
Yeah, when he said, I was just like when we were talking about diet, I thought it was kind of funny. He's like, I have to eat 6 meals because I hate eating. I was like, we have to eat 3 meals because we love eating too much. Like, so it's just kind of a right. But would you rather have to like for like a big calorie meal, Korean barbecue, all you can eat Korean barbecue, or all you can eat sushi? Like which one do you think has like a bet? Like which one do you personally prefer, and which one do you think has more utility?
Sam, do you even know what those things
sushi.
are?
Hey,
Hey, he lived in Washington. He was around a couple
That's
of
true,
us,
that's true.
widescreen individuals.
Not only did I grow up in Washington, my house growing up was on the border of the International District in Seattle. So I have had a lot of good food, actually. Sushi by far, if we're assuming if I am not poor and I have a lot of money and I'm not stressing about how much each roll costs, definitely sushi. Because I like there's a reason that every bodybuilder nowadays, their like cheat meal, their refeed is sushi, is because it's meat and rice, and you have some predictability in like I'm not gonna feel like absolute shit tomorrow morning, and I get to pig out on food that tastes good. I think there's just like for like poke and sushi, I think are like uniquely good for like pig out like cheat meals without some of the repercussions of like massive systemic inflammation, shitting yourself, like eating like a pizza would do. Like there's a lot. I think that those are like golden options.
I think I'm picking Korean barbecue, dude.
Just for taste?
Yeah, honestly. Well, I mean, it tastes pretty good, but I think for me, it's I just really like red meat. Like I really like eating red meat. And I think Korean barbecue also because of the social aspect to it too, because I like cooking as well, and so it's like cool. Like I'm cooking with friends. And if I go to like the right Korean barbecue place, California, at least specifically like the Bay Area, it's tough out here. I don't know why, but SoCal is a lot better when it comes to like all you can eat places and stuff like that.
I'm surprised. Like we have like Seattle Tacoma area, like crazy good options. Like you can't throw a rock without finding like a good pho place or something.
Oh, dude,
yeah.
Like love the pho out there. It's kind of funny. We actually like in our previous episode, like Andrew and I did. We were asking like, what's the better noodle? Like pho, ramen, pad thai, like. But anyway, like
that's the kind of stuff World Wars has started over.
Dude,
exactly. This will be the first and last episode, depending on the answers.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Korean barbecue for me. I think because I just like cooking. I like cooking with friends. I think I just like that it's meat and like it's also just like hella vegetables too. Like
I read Mongolian barbecue.
Was that
Mongolian barbecue?
I don't think I've ever been. What is it?
I'm not a foodie. I don't even know. Like, it's like meat. It's meat and veggies.
Is it like stir fry or is it like separate?
They had like stir fry and they had other stuff.
Okay.
It was good. I don't know. I like, if anybody listening to this is some kind of like Mongolian barbecue enthusiast, I wholeheartedly apologize. But I did enjoy it. I enjoyed when I went to the one.
The Mongolian. Good shit.
Yeah.
Dude, Mongolians are kind of like they're it's very rare that I come across one, but when I do, they're like Samoans, just more Chinese looking, because like they're like the ones I've come across, they're like super big and like really strong, and I mean like 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 they just have that stereotypical look of like a Mongolian like wrestler or like and I'm just like, holy shit, like that's really impressive.
They do the Mongolian.
Yeah, they actually like it's like some type of wrestling. Yeah.
I've seen
and
that.
like
that sounds wild. That's sick.
Really cool. Yeah, so it's very interesting. I mean, part of it is probably because like here in Vegas, like there is like just so much food around, but I would have to go with Korean barbecue as well. As much as I love sushi, and I mean I just had it today actually. But reason why I would go with
boxing bucks and now is eating sushi.
Exactly. Gotta keep up with the lifestyle, you know what I'm saying? Just
yeah, damn, jeez.
But reason why I would choose Korean barbecue is like, for one, I think you just have a bit more control over the meal. So like with sushi, you're always going to be at mercy of like how much like fish to rice there is. And that's true. And if it is like hypothetical, like we have like all the money in the world, it's just like, oh yeah, we just like very little rice, like just get nigiri and sashimi, like 100%. That's so true. But
90% like meat. Rice.
It's like 1 grain of rice.
I forgot you might be watching your carbs. I was thinking the opposite. I was like, oh shit, he's worried there's not going to be enough rice to get his calories up.
Oh, but that's a good point. But yeah, so and then also like I do like the way that they prepare the salads at Korean barbecue as well. That's typically how I do it at home also. Like I learned how to make that kind of sauce, and I just like grab a bag of vegetables, pour that sauce in there, and just like shake it up, and then that's my salad for the day. Like, so I would definitely go with Korean barbecue for that reason. It's like call an ambulance after.
I'm dead serious. I've never eaten a salad in my life. I'm not even joking.
Oh my god,
that is like the best, absolute like that is the best thing I've ever heard all day. Like, cause like I wish I had that type of resolve in my life to never break my morals like that.
Well, I always just go like I like every time someone's offered to me, I go, oh, I don't like salad. I don't even know if I don't like salad because I've never ate one, but I assume I don't like it.
It's the principle.
Yeah, just on principle. Why
not enough.
Oh my god! Really living up to eating like a big, strong, burly man. I mean, it's worked for you, dude. I think that's why I love it, because it's like I think more people should kind of have that mindset of like, okay, what does X person do to reach X goal?
Well, because people have a lot more answers inside themselves than they think they do. If I said, well, how do you think someone better than you trains? And they've got some good ideas. I'm like, motherfucker, you know what you're doing wrong. Fix it. Don't ask me. You already know.
Yeah.
Or someone's like, I'm trying to lose weight. What do skinny people eat? Less. What does big people eat? More. Like, you got some ideas for the food options. Like, there's so many things. Like, there's so many things you could ask somebody. Just like, what do you think the person that's better at that than you is doing? And they've got some pretty good guesses. So sometimes there's some deficits in knowledge, which is where we can step in. But that's why I've never really liked the whole like, oh, people are getting bad lifting outcomes because of a deficit of knowledge. No, I don't think so. There's more knowledge now than ever, and the average outcome inside the gym isn't much better because people don't even care to seek it out. We have more access to information than ever before, and the average gym bro has not gotten stronger. The problem is not an information deficit. People already have some pretty good ideas. It's a lack of implementation of their already existing pretty good ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop rambling. What was the second question?
So second question, this is like a little bit of a hot take of mine, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on it. So as we've kind of discussed throughout the entire podcast, we've narrowed down that being an advanced lifter is not so much doing completely different things. It is doing everything that you're kind of supposed to do and doing it super well. And there's not that many things that are true advanced techniques beyond just performing those basic like key performance indicators like really at a really high level. That being said, this is kind of like a general thought process that I kind of have with those few things that are actually advanced techniques, and that is advanced techniques are just doing beginner mistakes on purpose. Like, this is something that I kind of have taken from the more boxing martial arts side of things, because it's something that I kind of find to be true, which is like, as you get better at your basics and fundamentals and you kind of start breaking and those rules, they start producing positive results rather than negative ones when novices and beginners try doing that same thing. So what are your thoughts on that statement?
Could you give me an example of like a mistake?
Bulgarian.
Bulgarian, like, and this is one that actually comes to mind for me personally.
Unironically, I would say that could be an example, though.
Yeah, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say I get what you're saying. I think that there are a select few mistakes that can be implemented as advanced strategies, but there's also a ton of mistakes that are useless for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like not all beginner mistakes are functional if implemented intentionally. Just like in boxing, there are some things that nobody should do. Right.
True.
Like you should never have your back to your opponent. Very, very simple. There's no guy, like you could say, oh yeah, some guy, like some more experienced guys drop their guard really low. And that's something that would be a mistake for a beginner and would be a legitimate strategy for an advanced guys. So that would be a good example. Nobody turns their back to their opponent. That would just be no one does that. So I think there are some, right? Like we talked about earlier, implementing really high specificity training would be a mistake for a brand new trainee who needs to do some more varied bodybuilding style training. But for an advanced lifter, or even something like Bulgarian, where we do this ultra high frequency, high intensity, low volume per session, could be a legitimate strategy when implemented by an advanced lifter whose technique is good enough to survive. They've built up a lot of durability. They've built up a lot of robustness, whereas the beginner would absolutely get hurt, right? I could probably squat 5 or 6 days a week. It would suck, but I think I could do it, right? And I could maybe justify that being an intervention, whereas I would never justify a beginner doing it. So I get what you're saying. There's definitely some things that like a beginner has no right doing because they're a bad scaling of difficulty, that maybe someone who really has their technique is so efficient and they're outside the gym variables are so goddamn good that bad scaling of difficulty would be a legitimate tackleable challenge for them. You could say, I'm sure people would disagree with this one, and I don't know if I agree or disagree, but people would say like, oh, well, rounding your back. Beginners should probably just do like flat back RDLs and flat back deadlifts. But then as you get more advanced, if you choose to be a round back deadlifter, you can lean into that. Or maybe you could start doing Jefferson curls, right? I don't know about the Jefferson curls. I think anybody could ease into those. But as far as like the round back deadlifter, that could be another example that goes towards what you're saying as a positive example of, yeah, probably everybody should learn to like lift with a more neutral spine, with a more hip hinged dominant pattern. And then once they get more advanced, if they find that they can safely tolerate a rounded upper back and that bolsters their competitive result, then it's no longer a mistake for them. So I think I could come up with some examples where you're absolutely right, but I could also come up with a bunch of examples where that's just fucking useless.
I like it.
I think the example that comes to mind for me, because I've personally experienced this, is taking, especially like my accessories and stuff like that, but taking it like beyond failure. A lot of what GVS talks about, like hitting hit the reps that you're supposed to hit them clean. But after that, if you want to squeeze it out, like you can. Like I was doing seated lateral raises earlier today. After like rep 10, shit was ugly, but I kept pushing it because I can. Because you can handle it.
Yeah.
So I think that's another example too, where it's like you probably don't want to use shit form on your accessories in the beginning, but there's some room for that with certain caveats of, yeah, you initially want to get in your good quality reps, and then afterwards you can kind of headhunt and just get whatever the hell is left until you just can't take it anymore. So I think that's another example too. I think an example you were saying about like deadlifts is a really good one. In the beginning, I think it is probably better for most people to learn how to just lift with, generally speaking, a neutral spine, and then learning to kind of deviate and specialize from there, I think is a good way to kind of put it. Because, yeah, at that point, it's just like, might as well fuck around and find out.
Well, and the other thing is like some people, like everybody, like Paris made a video about this, and GBS also made a video about this, and I think it's probably a point that's under harped on, right? Is people have genetic strengths. Everybody has some kind of genetic strength. Might not be the best in the world, but we have different things, and we should be able to leverage those things towards getting towards our goals. And that's
Absolutely.
going to lead to some pretty big differences in programming. Like some people
Yep.
are unusually explosive, and they
Yep.
build a training program that leverages how explosive they are, right?
Mhm.
Like a perfect example off the top of my head is Andy Bolton, the first guy to ever deadlift 1,000 pounds in competition barehand in a single ply suit. His training percentages were oddly low volume, but he always felt that because he was able to move them so quickly, that was why he was able to use those training strategies. With being an unusually explosive person, he was able to like train a level of power production with slightly lower percentages than the standard lead up to 1,000 might be. You could go to someone who like they kind of move slow, but they can handle a ton of work, right? They're not explosive, but they can grind through set after set after set after set. Andrew, like you've seen Dan Green, his first rep of a set of 5 looks like shit.
Yeah.
He built his training program off of grinding rep after rep
Yeah.
after rep after rep. You built a training program off of this weird ability to do reps after reps after reps. So he's not hitting like top singles all the time. He's using that ability to take heavy weights for reps to leverage his strength stronger. And then the other one that is very common is some people, they're naturally strong to a certain degree, but to an even greater degree, their gift is that they're weirdly durable, right?
Yeah.
A perfect example of this, Max and I were just talking about this the other day. Andrew House is the most insanely durable person, and he has built a training system that I think anybody else that's 1,000-pound squatter and a 900-pound deadlifter, if they trained like he trained, they would be instantly injured. So he's built this training system using insane levels of durability, right? And so it's like we could all ask that question of ourselves. It's like, well, what do I do well? Is there a way I can, like, I shouldn't run away from my weaknesses, but can I leverage what that is into a program that's going to give me a unique advantage? Like, I feel like I fall into that durable camp a little bit because I can deadlift heavy 3 days a week, and I have yet to hurt myself. I can bench 500 pounds 3 days a week. I can squat 700 pounds 3 days a week. And those are pretty maximal weights for me. So it's like I'm going to lean into higher frequency, heavier work because I can, and it's given me a competitive edge. I don't know. I don't know what the hell I don't know what that was spanning off of, but it crossed my mind.
Well, building off of that, I think I'm a very explosive lifter, and I think that's why I tend to squat and also deadlift in a very specific way. So I'm high bar, mostly because low bar is very uncomfortable for my joints and stuff like that, especially my upper body. It's really hard to hold that position. But high bar is just very natural for me. I also just have the world's most internally rotated fucking shoulders, so I think that limits me in my mobility sometimes. But we're working on it. I really like I noticed this with high bar. I actually prefer whip in my bar when I'm squatting, because like when I'm hitting the hole of the squat, as I'm coming up, the weights are still kind of catching up with me too. So I feel like I get a little bit more out of my rebound because I'm just so upright, because I can sink so deep. So like for me, it's like I intentionally sink my squats as deep as I can so that I can maximally get the most out of that like rebound in the squat. Kind of similar for deadlift. There's no like eccentric in a deadlift. It's a concentric movement, but the way that I execute my slack pull and wedge, I like to use a lot of like a drive in it to really like pop the weight off the floor. Like you'll see me kind of go through like different phases of like my pull where I'm setting my grip, I'm setting my back, setting the hips, and then I'll like pull up and then just wedge right into that. And I get some of that like pop off the ground and just use my explosiveness to my advantage. Bench is different.
Do you know who Winston Thomas?
No. Who is he?
Squats and carbs.
Oh, yeah. I know him. One of my clients used to work with him, actually.
Yeah, I coached Winston for like 10 years, and he's just like you, where it's like if you take off the kilos and put on pound plates, he'll squat about 10 pounds extra. You know, you're one of those dynamic upright squatters, and you could just time the whip. Like I don't know if you guys saw Tank Murakami's squat PR for a double. He did 815 for 2. You can see that the timing on that whip is immaculate. And it's like that's a perfect example of like, yeah, that's probably a very advanced technique, right? Being able to time the bar whipping to hit you in the bottommost position and spring you up. Definitely a mistake for a beginner to try to do that. But Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a very real thing. The high, like the more upright you are, and a little bit like the more dynamic
Mhm.
of a squatter you are, a little bit more explosive. I noticed that a lot, and it's like Winston actually had to stop because he kept posting pound plate squats to flex because it looked bigger, and then he went into a meet prep, and then was like, holy shit, the kilos are crushing me in the hole.
Yeah, yeah. Like whenever I go back to high bar, I'm just like, okay, we're specifically using kilos now, because
Yeah,
like
Mhm.
the whip on
you
it.
got or you learn to love it. You almost learn to love the whip way too much.
Yeah, and even with like a stiff bar, I still feel like I get enough whip out of it. It's
Oh
like
yeah, you
like
squat enough that a
feels-
stiff bar will whip.
yeah, like at first, like the first session or two will feel a little crunchy, but then after a while, it just starts feeling like good again.
Well,
But,
that's something that I've always, it's so funny when I get to talk to like stronger people. That's
mhm.
like such niche stuff to bitch about.
I
Like only some
know.
people know. I'm like, yeah, you ever use like a Texas squat bar? Those things fucking suck. And everybody at the gym's like, why does it suck? It's a nice bar. It's a piece of shit. It starts whipping at 550.
Yeah.
Like
So you
it's
don't like
actual
squat bars
pool
either?
noodle. What was that?
You don't like squat bars either?
So like it's weird because the Texas squat bar is like the standard one used in most USPA competitions. It's the most
Mhm.
common one, right? I hear they were better in the past, but they're
Yeah.
terrible now. They're pool noodles. A
Yeah. Yeah.
Ohio
Yeah.
power bar is legitimately much stiffer than a
Yeah.
Texas squat bar, even though it's 10 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
So I hate those. I'll take the Ohio bar all day, every day.
Yeah. I never
But
really
there are
liked the squat bar.
the rogue ones, like the ones that the guys that run like the monolith meets, they
Mhm.
know that the Texas is like the guys who are like doing like slightly high wrapped like 1050s all the time. They know what the good bars are. And it's like those I get it. Like it's like, yeah, if you buy the rogue squat bar, if what you want is zero whip, that's what you get.
Mhm.
I like the feeling of the thicker bar for my high bar. I don't have any good reason
Mhm.
to.
Okay.
But yeah, as far as bars go, I like just in Ohio. You can't go wrong with Ohio
No,
bar.
you really can't.
They're the
I,
gold standard for a reason.
yep. Couldn't agree more. That is really niche stuff.
Those are some real.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Carl's like, what the hell are you guys talking about? Like, oh, it starts whipping
I
at
know, right?
600.
Me, like, exactly. My lifetime best is literally a 405. Like, and right now I can't even do that at the moment. So, like, I'm just like, that is a world away, but I'll get there one day. One day I'll
Well, it's so funny
understand.
because nobody had enough sympathy for him. In his last meet prep, John Hack found out 6 weeks out that they were going to use a Texas bar. And he's like,
Mhm.
oh shit. And he
Mm.
switched, and his training was going terrible. And everybody was like, oh, what's wrong with John Hack? The sauce isn't working. No, he's using a terrible bar. It's whipping. I can see it.
That's so funny.
I've used it. I promise that bar
Oh
sucks.
my god.
Like when you're squatting that much, it matters if it's oscillating. Like
Yeah, it really does. I think that's probably the only reason why. Well, not the only reason, but it's one of the biggest reasons why I only really care to compete USAPL is just there's a standard bar across the board. I
dude,
really appreciate.
listen, if it was up to me, all untested feds would use the stiff bar on deadlifts too. I don't give a shit about the squat bars because it's like I get it. It's like Jesus probably just give him a squat bar. Don't make him deal with the whip. Like give him the stiffest bar possible. I want to see how much he can squat. But
Yeah.
it's like I don't really care about the squat bars one way or the other. Like we could have them, we could not have them. I'm impartial. If it was up to me, I could wave my wand. Nobody would use anything other than a stiff bar. Just obscuring comparison between tested guys and untested guys with these deadlift bars, and then
Mhm.
suddenly we have a unified standard for like 20 years, and it's like, okay, well the untested guys, we use a deadlift bar on kilos. We have a unified standard. Suddenly, Chris Duffin just makes a new bar, bribes some people with totally different specs, and then every deadlift record falls. There's a reason that like the
Yeah.
equipment in the Olympic weightlifting hasn't changed because we don't want to artificially inflate the lift. We want to be able to compare. Like
Absolutely.
weightlifting, there's issues with comparing drug testing status with guys now and guys 30 years ago. I get that part. But the feat of strength itself is pretty one-to-one. A 200 kilo clean and jerk now is about the same as a 200 kilo clean and jerk back then. The bar is slightly better, but it's not fundamentally changed, right? I think we should all be lifting on an Ohio power bar for deadlifts. I'm so tired of this shit being a moving goalpost or like, oh, we entered a sleeve division. Sleeves get progressively thicker. So we now get to eclipse guys' numbers from the past without actually being any better than them. Make it fucking bare knee if we're not gonna if we're gonna allow sleeves to change over time. Because people are like, it's not that different. It is that different. Go get the rebands that guys were wearing when Raw was first invented, those blue rebands that everybody lifted in. Compare those to a pair of fucking like Inzers. Get the fuck out of here if you're telling me that's the same thing. And they're classified the same way. I don't like this. Like it's the problem that has plagued powerlifting since its inception. We got knee wraps, and then we got squat suits, and we said the squat suits were safety, but the squat suits got stronger and stronger and stronger. Then we got multiply, and then we said, oh, this multiply thing has gone way too far. Let's just go to wraps because we need the wraps for knee safety. And then people realized, well, we can squat pretty heavy without the wraps and the knees are safe. So let's do raw, like real raw strength. The knee sleeves are for warmth, and then the belt is necessary to stay safe. Right? That's what we're going to do. And then the knee sleeves start getting thicker. We're going down the same goddamn rabbit hole again. Fucking take off the sleeves if this is what's going to happen. We can't, it's the only sport where I can't tell you how much better, I can't make a comparison between John Hack and Ed Cohn because Ed Cohn was in wraps and a suit for his squat, and his bench was raw, and then his deadlift was on a stiff bar. John's is on a deadlift bar, but then his squat is raw. So it's like, they're both amazing. I think you could probably make the argument that John has passed him. But that being said, there's no way to prove it because fucking the equipment has changed. I can't take the greats from each era and look at them side by side and conclude anything. And it's so frustrating that this is and so sorry for my rambling, but if it was up to me,
I was saying we love it.
Only. Like Max does both USPA and USAPL.
Yeah.
All year round, he trains on the stiff bar because that's the standard that I care about. The USAPL has the most lifters of any federation in the world. That means the competition standard is probably the highest. It's got the biggest gene pool. I want Max to compete. I can't. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'm not allowed to. I want Max to compete with the best of the best. I want him to lift to the highest standard. So it's going to be the stiff bar most of the year. So that way it's not just taking some niche fucking, I mean, I guess it wouldn't be a niche record if he did it, but I want him to be on that same thing that the most people are contesting. It's the same thing that drove me up a wall when everybody was saying that Andrew Richards' overhead press was the most impressive lift ever. No, it's because no one's competing in the overhead press. People are dumping because people did a 500-pound strict press. 2 people I did, or if not more, back when the clean and press was an Olympic event. If that continued, people would have done more. The problem is we stopped doing it, and that's why that record hasn't gone up. It's not that he's 10% better than anybody else in the world. It's that way less people are doing it. The number of people doing an activity inherently makes being the best at it substantially more impressive. Doing a lift that no one does is cool and fun. I support it and have fun in your training, but I don't give a fuck about your sub 200-pound Jefferson deadlift world record. Nobody good is trying, and if they did, you wouldn't have it.
Oh man. Is this why you moved over to strongman?
I know, that's what I was thinking too.
Strongman's worse. I really mean that.
Oh shoot! Okay. Didn't expect that.
We're all gonna pretend like everybody going for the 505 kg. Like, what? Why are we wearing suits?
Yeah.
Why? We're all gonna downplay like, oh, deadlift suits don't do that much. Bullshit.
Then why use it?
People are getting 100 pounds out of that thing. Some of them. So, some people have technique that specifically leverages to get the most weight out of the suit possible. Someone like Ivan Makarov is probably getting about 100 pounds. Like we compare his raw kilo to his suited kilo, he's probably getting about 100 pounds because he leverages into it to get the most he can out of it off the floor and then sorts it out with hitching at the top. I like Ivan. I really hope he succeeds. But we're all hiding the fact from the public that, oh, we're using long figure eights and oh, we're using a deadlift suit. The deadlift suit doesn't do much, but I'm still going to wear it. Right. And it's there's so many things that are kind of people are taking advantage of the public not knowing what they're looking at in strongman. Yeah. But I don't like that it takes away from it. It's it makes it a great spectacle, but as a purist strength sport, why did they allow suits for the squat at the Arnold? Because they didn't want to be embarrassed by the fact that it was less than powerlifters. We shouldn't be embarrassed by that. That's not embarrassing. They're not powerlifters. They have to be good at a lot more things, but they want to believe these guys are the strongest in the world at everything. Fuck no, they aren't. Let's stop pretending there. It's impossible.
Professional wrestling.
Yeah, and it's I don't know. That's I would say powerlifting has its issues with those constantly moving things. Strongman is terribly concerning. How erratic it is for like what the standards are and how they evolve with time, and what like how single competitions can change the entire nature of the sport for 10 years. Like it's even more erratic and concerning. I like it. I like the idea of it being like, my 10 rep max matters. The fact that my 10 rep max matters as much as my 1 rep max, I think is cool as fuck. The fact that I still have to be able to run, pretty cool. All that stuff I like, but damn, it worries me. I don't think I will never like. For some reason it's cool to say powerlifting is lame, and it's cool to say powerlifting is easy. But for some reason, everybody that says powerlifting is easy sucks at it. If it's so easy, why are you bad at it? Because it's like, dude, let me tell you, being bad at soccer is easy. Because people are like, powerlifting is so easy compared to real sports. You're a bad powerlifter. Being a bad soccer player is just as easy. You just show up and stand on the field and get scored on. Being bad at anything is easy. You're just self-reporting how lazy you are with powerlifting.
Yep.
If it's easy, it means you're not trying hard. Like, yeah, sure. Are there sports that are harder than powerlifting? Yes, I'm not an idiot, right? But the people that are the most vocal that powerlifting is so easy, you're doing a really weird accidental self-report that you don't try hard at all, and that's why you suck.
I think, like you were saying with John Hack's situation, when everyone was giving him shit when he switched bars and his training was going to crap, most people aren't strong enough to realize like how important equipment is. Like we were just talking about how like you like the squat bar. I fucking hate it. Like I fucking hate it. Meanwhile, there's going to be somebody who probably squats like 315 as their max. It doesn't really matter if they're using an Ohio power bar or a fucking like squat bar because they're not at that point yet. Like that's not the level they're at. Which
I take advantage. I take advantage of this myself. I'm gonna go bench 600, and I'm gonna do it on a fat pad, and nobody's gonna know that I'm cheating.
Exactly. Yeah. Like it's just again different levels, man. Different fucking levels. I'm sure by the time where I start squatting 8, it's like different ball game too. Because I can feel the change in whip from like 250 kilos, 551 pounds, and like 600 pounds. It's like it's
That's
wild.
where,
Love it.
for whatever it's worth, that's around where I found the most difference. Like when I was getting stronger, there was this point where I was like, whip, what does that mean? And then I kind of got towards like the high 500s. And I was like, oh, that's what whip means.
Yeah.
Because I missed a squat or two when it hit me halfway up because I timed it badly. I got the shakes. I was like, oh, that's what that was. But then like it didn't really get much worse after that. Because it's like after that, you're just kind of having to constantly deal with it. And like you develop the habits of like the biggest thing is understanding how to settle the whip, let the weight sit low before you start it. And then once your timing is down, I think that's the big thing is like you have to go from not thinking about it to understanding it. But then the timing is the same, whether you're doing 600, 650, 700, 750.
That's good to know. I actually wanted to talk to you and Max and kind of ask like, when you were kind of getting to those levels of strength, like what were some things you noticed that changed? Because like I remember going from 551 as my 1 rep max to then repping out like 595 and just how different that felt. It's weird because I think at least for like high bar, at least I really like getting the bar like directly on top of my traps because I think that's where I get the most out of the whip. And I don't know, I think this is where like my purism comes out because I'm just like, that's not a real high bar, it's a mid bar. Fuck you. Like you're just an immobile fuck. But like for me, like that's just how I prefer to squat. And so I remember the last like really heavy like back squat I did was like 595 for a triple. And I remember just how like weightless the bar kind of felt on my back. And I'm just like, it's terrifying because I feel like if I misstep, I'm fucked. But I know that like that sensation, like that's how I know it's going to be like a good fucking set because like I just get everything nice and tight. The bar's whipping at just the right amount where I'm still in control. And then it's just quick brace, but like quick big brace and then just catch the bar at the right time and then just like hit the whole rebound super hard.
Well, that's a big one is you need to understand that going faster for the setup is like when you're weaker, it feels like you're saving energy.
Yep.
When you're stronger, it's better to have that weight on your back for a longer time and do it really, really well. That was a big that's a big transition I noticed like people make right around the 600 mark.
Yeah.
Because like all of the 700-pound squatters I know, none of them have a fast unrep.
Yeah.
None
I'm
of those,
super methodical with
exactly,
mine.
And none of
Very
the ones
like
I've ever
step
coached
by
to
step by
get to that. Yeah, none of the guys I've coached that squat 700 pounds do it that quickly. So it's like that's the first thing is like this idea of trying to be short, right? We're trying to let that weight, we're intentionally letting us compress us, not fold us, but compress us. Because if that weight, even in a high bar position, can sit closer to the ground and we let that weight settle low, and like you said, just grab it and you time the whip, right? And it's like, I think probably, well, I could do this off air, but I'm going to do it on air anyway. I'm so sorry. I'm going to look at your squat for a sec.
Okay.
I have a theory, but I don't want to say it in case I'm wrong because I do not have what your squat looks like memorized.
That's totally okay. I don't expect you to.
Yeah, I would be a little creepy if I did.
I do.
I'd
I've
be,
been
oh,
watching you for quite a while, and I
your
have to
left
say.
foot looks slightly off.
Oh, I noticed this thing you do when you squat. It's great. Keep it up. What? Your name's
Like, I need you a couple different shorts and the next time you wear when you squat, you know, just so I can get better angles, right?
Yeah, I need you to move your camera to a different angle next time. Let me see this. All right, actually, you've already moved towards it, which is really interesting because like in the past you did like a truly like the most knee dominant squat you could possibly do.
Yeah.
And you can see as you've gotten stronger, you've started making it a blend of hip and knee strength. Because it's like you're never going to squat with a bunch of hinge. It's just not your high bar. You've got a long torso. It's a bad idea, right?
Yes.
But you need.
I'm not going to low bar my high bar because I'm just
exactly.
not.
Yeah. Exactly right, and because it's like you're never going to call upon your hinge. And there's three kind of general movers in the squat. Speaking really broadly, we have our knees, we have our hips, and we have our hip extension, right? Hips being like kind of our adduction, like our glute and adductor strength versus our hip hinging strength. Those are kind of the three things you can call upon. If you're a weightlifter, it's all knees because that's the primary joint you're trying to strengthen with the squat to carry over to your competition movements. For powerlifting, an upright squatter will try to draw upon the hips and the knees as much as possible, which is cool because you're already doing it.
Yeah.
But like, if you wanted like a visual example of someone who squats very similar to you, just he uses his hips a bit more, but like uses just as much quads is Tank Murakami. Very, very like you can see how much strength he has built up in his glutes to be able to push his squat. Because that was what I noticed. I've had the exact same thing where I got stuck with my high bar squat pretty hard at about 700.
Yeah.
And it was because I was always trying to do it with just one joint or like doing the vast majority of the work with one joint, right? Yeah. And it wasn't until I had this idea that I'm like, okay, that's not wise. I'm trying to squat as much as possible, not just get my quads as strong as possible.
Yeah.
So I started doing more dedicated work to strengthen my hips. And it wasn't even, I didn't even have to make a ton of conscious effort to change my technique. It was, I started doing accessory work to strengthen my hips. And then I intuitively started finding them in my squat a little bit more. So I'm guessing that's probably going to be a part of your process to push up to those new levels is just get the hips wicked strong because your quads are already strong enough to squat a big old PR.
Just naturally.
They don't, exactly. They don't,
I'm very open in my stance. I have hip external rotation for days. I think that's why, like, I don't have like the longest arms, but I think because of my hips, like I can pull a very efficient sumo deadlift.
Yeah.
Second to that too.
Your sumo is one of the best big man sumos.
Thanks, dude. Appreciate it.
Well, you know, it's like it's almost a different lift because like the position you can leverage into versus someone who's skinnier, it's like it's almost a different lift, right?
Yeah.
And Max and I was talking about like big man deadlifts and then also big man sumos. It's rare to find a good one. You have a very good big man sumo.
I'm very lucky because of my hip morphology. Like I have so much external rotation. I have shit internal, but tons of external.
Who needs that shit?
Low key, yeah. You barely use it in fucking like powerlifting anyways. But yeah, I used to like, I think this is where we can talk about like kind of going back to this other topics we were talking about earlier on, having intention in training. Like my cues for squat back then were literally just sit down, stand up, and just fucking pray to God. Like literally that's it. Whereas now, like I'm intentionally breaking evenly at the hips and knees, trying to load into the hips, not to the point where it is like a low bar squat because I'm just not fucking built like that. But, you know, just making sure I stay over the middle of my foot. These very general cues have served me very well. And I think that's I used to have the issue of when I would rebound out of the hold of squat, the first thing that would come up would be my heels. So I'd lose balance really easily. So for me, learning how to
Same.
you too? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I'm doing something right. I'm being in my hips just a tad more, and it makes such
just finding your heels, just like your outer. If you can find your outer heel without giving up the pressure off the front of your foot, you never want to give away that pressure off the front of your foot because that's giving away your leverage to effectively use your quads. So you can find your outer heel, especially in your bottommost position, as you drive out of it, and then you'll find the stronger you get your glutes, the nicer that feels. The more you're going to feel like effortless with heavier and heavier weights, because then you're not going to naturally want to it's like, yeah, no, I can keep great foot pressure at 600, but I put 650 on there. The heel, I'm losing the heels a little bit because I don't have any confidence in my glutes, right? And just like,
right.
One of the things I did was just a lot of front foot elevated, like split squats, driving really hard through the midfoot, kind of being aware of that outer heel, and just basically just finding things that made my glutes sore as shit and doing a bunch of those. Because I noticed that my hamstrings would get stronger and stronger and stronger because I was doing the same thing you're doing, which is this huge emphasis on strict hip hinging to try to keep my back and posterior chain strong. But I noticed it didn't give me strong glutes. I had strong erectors and strong hamstrings, but my glutes were never really that sore.
That's funny because my glutes almost. There will be moments where they feel sore, but seldom will they ever feel sore. It's mostly hamstring and lower back.
That's exactly how it was for me. And it wasn't that I kind of realized I was like, the reason I'm pitching forward when the squats get heavy is because I don't have confidence in the strength of my glutes. I should probably do some supplemental work to really directly target those. And I kind of just asked the question of I went into the gym one day. I kind of had a list of 8 things that I thought might work. And I kind of whittled it down over a couple of weeks to what makes my glutes the most sore. And that was the only feedback loop was what's overloadable that led to my glutes getting sore. And it was largely just deep unilateral work was what did it for me. And I noticed that if I could just my hamstrings get sore and my belt's been shooting up. My squat was if I do it was the same way for my squat. Is if my deadlift, if my RDL and my stiff leg goes up, my pull goes up. If I just keep getting my glutes stronger and bigger, my squat seems to just feel better every week just from doing baseline amounts of squatting.
Okay. That's going to be interesting because I want to do a competition in December, and so we'll be pivoting into more comp specific work soon. And I was kind of thinking about that. I was like, it's been a while since I've hit any crazy heavy squat for a single. So I feel like I'm due for some more specific training in that regard. And I don't know. Paris and I have pretty much figured out by deadlift. I feel like I'm pretty confident in saying that. It's just
for at least the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's attack the fuck out of my posterior chain. If I do some sumo deadlifts, just make sure the quality of my pulls are really good with very strict pausing, timing when to push with my regular competition stuff. Bench, it's just pack on a lot of fucking muscle. That's basically the answer for me, at least. And then squat, I feel is one where we have a pretty good system kind of fleshed out, but I feel like more could be maybe not necessarily added onto, but just refined, I guess might be a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my guess. Just having worked with people with similar leverages to us, I kind of observed that same thing that worked for me was just kind of a necessary part of the process. Whereas it's the exact opposite, right? We're looking at okay, we got the front side and the back side of the squat. You and I probably need to pay a little extra attention to the back side because the front side is naturally strong. You take a longer femur lifter, they have to do the exact opposite, right? It's just after every squat session, let's get you on the belt squat. Let's just do some heel elevated shit. Every time you squat, you got to hit the front of the leg because you're not hitting it enough when you squat. You got such a hinge heavy pattern that the quads aren't going to get strong from doing that. We need to do supplemental work. It's almost the exact opposite for us, right? It's okay, cool. You've got such a quad dominant squat pattern that your glutes are going to need the extra work. The quads are never going to need it. That's at least what I've personally observed.
No, I agree. Because I get most of my quad growth I attribute to just pure squatting. I do feel, exactly.
When people ask me they're like, "Oh, Sam, your quads are big. How do you do that?" I was like, I just went up and down with a bar on my back the same as you are. My quads just grew more. Literally, if you said, Sam, you just need to get your quads as big as possible, I'd probably just hack squat 2 or 3 times a week and that's it. Just remove the balance component, but squatting is just all I've ever done to grow my quads, and it's never been an issue. All right, we should sign off.
Awesome. Yep. So those are some really interesting points, really interesting things to consider and things to talk about. I am excited for when they apply to me. Like I am gonna chase down like advanced ass numbers. Like really excited, grateful to have had the opportunity to be able to listen in on a conversation between two advanced lifters that I highly respect, that I will eventually come to be like. And
I realized partway, and I felt so bad that we were just talking. You were just sitting there saying, "Oh, fuck."
Yeah.
No, I was enjoying it. To be fair,
you might be, but it looks so bad that we're cutting out of your own video.
I'm just here for the ride. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's like when you're on a road trip and it's like there's supposed to be a couple more people, but then it just ends up being an odd number.
Yeah, it's like a road trip when one person gets talked over the whole time. That's not good.
Thankfully, I'm an introvert, so it made my job easy. But it was a wonderful podcast. Really enjoyed everything. So I'm really grateful for all that. So I think given the length of this conversation, closing remarks are unneeded.
Yeah.
But you can find all of us. So you can find Sam at Sheether Training on YouTube. Watch all of his videos. Andrew Kyle Tang on IG and on YouTube. He's making more YouTube videos, and they're great sources of information. So highly recommend checking those out. And always remember, do your best, or at least what you can. Keep trying hard, and start where you stand.